Hey guys, today we step through a crooked cottage door and into the kind of night that makes your breath bloom into little ghosts, where the wind speaks under the eaves, and every sound feels like it's tiptoeing. You're not alone. You shuffle in with a gaggle of medieval children who have already claimed the warmest square of floor by the hearth. The fire is low, glow more than flame, and the smoke hangs like a shawl stitched from wood sap and patience. You find your place boots scuffing packed earth, and there it is. The straw bed, a humble, crinkly island that whispers as if telling secrets about the summer field it used to be. It looks scratchy. It is scratchy. And yes, you probably won't survive this. The first thing that hits you is the smell-dry hay with a memory of cows and sunshine braided with peat smoke, and the faint, salty tang of sweat-damp wool. Someone coughs. Someone giggles. Someone shushes the giggler with the authority of a 9-year-old who has decided they are in charge. The dog has already spun in a circle and installed himself as an honorary child at the foot of the heap tail, thumping like a slow drum. Outside, the wind fingers the thatch. Inside, you kneel and test the straw with your palm. It crackles like paper lanterns and shifts to the shape of your hand, then springs back as if it doesn't entirely trust you yet. You lie down, and the straw accepts you with that skeptical rustle, as if to say fine, but no kicking. Mainstream fact slipped in gently. Most peasant households didn't own a bed the way you imagine it. What they had was a sack, often linen or rough canvas stuffed with straw, a palliasse spread on a wooden frame or directly on the floor beside the hearth. Children shared out of necessity space, warmth, watchfulness. In winter, bodies were central heating and you are now a radiator with opinions. A parent moves past like a quiet moon, tucking a patched wool blanket over the whole squirming pile. It's heavy, scratchy, undeniably alive with the scent of sheep, and yet you feel more secure beneath its weight the way a book feels safer with a thick cover. For a moment, listen, the cottage settles. A rafter creaks like an old sailor. The embers sigh. The wind outside trades gossip with the hedgerow. From somewhere in the village floats a faint clonk, someone latching a door, and then the longer hush returns, stitched by the small sounds of shared sleep, sniffs the whisper of straw, a child trying to find the coldest part of the pillow and regretting it instantly. You try not to itch. Everyone tries not to itch. Someone fails and there's a frantic scritch, scritch, scritch that becomes a family chorus for 5 seconds before settling again. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you've unlocked medieval spa mode, which includes exfoliating straw pokes and a complimentary dog foot in your ribs. A quirky tidbit, some households scented their straw with herbs sweet gale lavender where available or pennyroyal, not because they were fancy, but because those plants mildly deter pests and make your nose feel like it's dreaming of summer. If you inhale carefully, you catch a ghost of green under the hay. It's like sleeping in a breadbasket that read poetry once. You're aware of the draft. Medieval walls, wattle and daub or rough stone aren't really walls so much as opinions about the weather. The door doesn't meet the jamb, it nods at it politely. The wind has been promoted to assistant bedfellow and keeps running internship laps around your ankles. You pull the blanket higher, shoulder to shoulder with 2 small heaters who've already slipped into a sweet open-mouth sleep. One snores with pragmatic determination. Light joke number 2, this is the original white noise machine set to Barnyard Piccolo. A mainstream historical rhythm moves with the Our Family prayers, a sign of the cross, a murmured God keep us, and a few whispered charms older than the chapel, because people were practical and liked to cover all their bases. That's how you end up with a penny charm tied to the bedpost, or a sprig of rowan tucked under the palliasse insurance against bad dreams the nightmare, and whatever else tries to ride you till dawn. Here's the hint of scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether parents thought children needed more spiritual shielding than adults, or whether these charms were simply household habits applied to every sleeper like washing hands, if washing hands were, an occasional suggestion rather than a lifestyle. Some argue the fear of the mare was universal. Others say it's oversold by later folklore collectors who loved a good shiver. You and your practical second-person body are fine with all protections when straw squeaks and rafters talk. A little superstition feels like a wool cap for the soul. The dog sighs. The warmth spreads slowly the way tea does through a cold cup. You become aware that the straw isn't just under you, it's around you, gently corralling your limbs so everyone can fit. This is a social technology, the way a family unconsciously arranges itself bigger kids on the outside to block drafts littler ones in the creamy centre of heat. Someone's feet point toward the hearth. Someone's hair smells like smoke and wild thyme. On a good night, it's a song with many verses, but one chorus: stay warm, stay close, breathe together. On a bad night, it's elbows, tickles, and philosophical disagreements about whose turn it is to be the windshield. Another quirky detail: people sometimes kept embers in a covered pan near the bed. Careful to relight the fire toward midnight, or toward the second sleep, that curious wakeful interval many pre-industrial folks experienced. You might wake, poke the coals, whisper pray, or tell a quick dream, then back down into straw time. If your modern sleep tracker were here, it would be weeping gently, wondering why your REM looks like a goat path. Light joke number 3, it's fine. Your tracker will just call it deep rustic mode. Now that mainstream historical fact, again reframed so you feel it beds and bedding tract status. Nobles had frames and feather-ticks tapestries to break the draft bed curtains like private weather. Here on the peasant floor, your curtain is everybody's body, and surprisingly it works. But here's another scholarly wrinkle. Some sources claim palliaces were regularly refreshed with new straw seasonally after harvest. Others suggest families stretched each fill as long as possible, only stirring and sunning the tick when insects or smell filed a formal complaint. Which was typical. That's a village-to-village question, a winter-to-winter question, and scholars still write tart footnotes over it. Tonight the straw is, fine. You decide it is fine. Your nose agrees mostly. Let's talk sound again, because the wind is an actor in this play. It strokes the thatch, tests the shutter, then puts its mouth to the keyhole and plays a hollow flute. You pull the blanket to your ear and listen as your heartbeat syncs with the hearth's tiny crackles, the world shrinking to a circle of red coals and the curve of a dog's back. Your ASMR is artisanal, a little rustle, a little breathing choir, a little bell of the night somewhere far away, maybe a watchman tapping his staff, maybe just a sheep disagreeing with a fence post. You think about your modern mattress and laugh softly, because comfort is a spectrum, and tonight's comfort is measured in shared warmth and the absence of rain on your face. A final quirky squeeze: someone has tucked a warmed stone heated by the hearth at the bottom of the blanket. Your toes discover it with the joyful surprise of future archaeologists finding a hoard. You nestle into your straw channel, the dog lofts a sigh, and your eyelids begin their slow treaty with gravity. But we still owe the introduction beats, so you whisper to the dark. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You grin in the dim because the ask feels like a candle flame small. Honest enough. And then, because this is a conversation, you invite them. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let the comment section turn into a map of night, a string of little bells ringing across the world. You're almost asleep. The wind reels out some last ribbon of sound. The hearth throws a ruby blink. Warmth holds. But the medieval night is never just sleep. It holds rules and rituals you haven't learned yet, and one of them is about to shuffle past the fire, barefoot carrying a wooden pail and a secret. But the next duty was even stranger. You don't wake into comfort. You manufacture it one crunchy armful at a time. You step outside with a woven basket that has already seen too many summers, and the yard answers with a prickle of starlight and a faint cool hush. The straw stack stands there like a sleepy golden whale against the dark oaten wheaten whatever the harvest gave, tied in sheaves that creak when you tug the twine. You grab a fistful, then another, and the stalks rasp like 1,000 paper straws gossiping. Warm exhale fogs in front of your face. Your hands come back sprinkled with dust so fine it might as well be moon powder. The children pad behind you in oversized shirts, the small one solemnly carrying a tiny bundle, because important jobs come in all sizes. In a world without thermostats, you build warmth the way a baker builds bread, measure knead shape, wait for the heat to take. Back inside, the palliace sack lies open rough linen with seams a bit off-centre, because life is not a tailor. You shake straw into the mouth of the sack, and it swallows greedily, filling the corners like a chest learning to breathe. Mainstream historical fact: most peasant beds weren't feather. They were straw-stuffed palliaces, sometimes on a plank frame, sometimes on the floor near the hearth, sometimes in a box bed if you were lucky or northern. Straw is resilient, cheap, and wonderfully cooperative. It springs insulates and forgives your bones their complaints. You fluff with your forearms, then pat the surface as if you're taming a friendly alien. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you're a medieval sleep engineer. Your toolset is gravity and squish. You learn techniques quickly because comfort is a craft. Too little straw and the floor's opinions will find your hips. Too much and you'll roll to the edges like a dumpling seeking an exit. You aim for that Goldilocks depth where the middle has lift but the edges don't become cliffs. The older child kneels and does the time-honoured wiggle test, burrowing side to side until channels appear, kid-sized canoe troughs that keep bodies from colliding like slow-motion meteors at 2 a.m. A parent folds the open end of the sack, tucks it under, then ties it with a braided cord so the straw can do its job without launching a stealthy escape. A quirky tidbit floats in with the dust motes some families mixed in a pinch of herbs, pennyroyal, southernwood or lavender where it grew to nudge away fleas and lend the bed a whisper of green. Others sprinkled a crumble of dried rushes because they break less, or layered last year's cleaner oat straw on top of a coarser older underbed like a mattress sandwich with sensible bread. If a neighbour kept bees, a line of wax across a seam might even appear sealing small gaps with summer's memory. You smooth the surface again, and your palms come up perfumed with the field. You learn to sort straw the way a librarian sorts books. Heads and seed bits. Out they scratch and invite little visitors. Thick stems, good for spring. The soft, pithy centres that crumble into dust. Fine in a thin layer, but not too much, or else you'll wake up looking like you slept in a bakery. And that brings us to a scholar's squabble tucked between the stalks. Historians still argue whether households replace straw often after harvest a few times a year, or sparingly only when infestation or damp force the issue. Probate inventories and sermon jokes suggest rotation. Prescriptive texts and economy hint at thrift. The truth likely wandered house to house. A bumper harvest meant generous refills. A lean year meant shaking out sunning and pretending the squeak was charming. You stand in that debate with straw on your sleeves, deciding that tonight's refill counts as often, because your skin will not negotiate. You heft the palliasse to its place by the hearth, where warmth radiates in a slow, patient way, the kind that doesn't announce itself but is simply there when you notice. The floor is hard but not unkind. There's packed earth under you, perhaps smoothed with clay, perhaps scattered with last week's rushes. A plank board across 2 low stools offers a little lift for the parents. The children get the premium real estate closer to embers. The dog tests the edge like a health inspector, then approves with a yawn so wide you can see tomorrow. Like joke number 2, you just got 5 stars from the Department of Canine Comfort. Now the housekeeping dance, you break up the peaks, fill the valleys and pinch down the corners so nobody ends up sleeping diagonally as a lifestyle choice. To control drift, you lay a rough sheet or ticking over the sack and lash it with 2 cords to pegs hammered into the wall. Medieval hack if the house has a built-in bench along the wall, a sleeping shelf, you wedge the palliasse snugly, so straw has nowhere to escape except into sweet dreams. Another quirky practice, some families kept a thin older mattress under the main one as a crumb catcher, shaking both out together in the morning air. Others rolled the entire thing up by day like a pasta spiral clearing floor space for work. This is multitasking before the word existed. You keep one ear tuned to the hearth where the wood sighs toward ember. Tonight's sensory anchors shift from wind to fire, tiny clicks like glass a low shh, as a knot gives up its ghost to the occasional popping leaf of resin. The sound says, stay. The light says, hush. In that slow orange you spot a wicker headrest, really just a woven bolster that keeps hair off the damp sack, and if you're honest, keeps small noses above the great wool sea. A wooden warming pan leans on the stone's lid, cracked its cargo of heat, ready to slip beneath the blanket just before lights out, which in this house means when the last ember is tucked in. Mainstream fact framed by your fingertips: straw is not hay. Hay is fodder. Straw is aftermath. Hay feeds animals. Straw hosts your dreams. Mixed up in speech, yes, but not in practice. Your night depends on that difference, and yet another tidy debate hangs over the threshold. Did people routinely beat or card the straw to soften it first? Some manuals mention threshing the bedding to restore spring. Others are silent, and you suspect the answer is technological. If a flail is at hand and time allows you beat. If not, the children become the flails. Which is to say now it's time for the favourite medieval pre-sleep workout, the stomp and smoother. 2 kids climb onto the palliasse, then you join knees bent, feet bare, doing a solemn little jig that would get 0s from the royal choreographer and 10s from your lower back. The goal is gentle compaction. Align the stalks, crush the awkward elbows of straw, devote the shifty bits to a life of obedient springiness. The dog attempts to contribute with interpretive tail wagging, and is fired from the project for over-enthusiasm. Light joke number 3 in 3 minutes, you've invented CrossFit Bale edition. You pause to breathe. Dust settles in slow galaxies through the lamplight. Your throat tastes faintly sweet, a reminder that fields have flavours. Somebody sneezes and laughs, and then sneezes at the laugh dust. You drag the blanket, a patched thing of wool and history, over the mattress to test the slide. If it snags too much, you know the straw sticks up like curious questions, and you take another pass with your hands smoothing until the blanket skims. Smooth blanket. Fewer midnight itches, fewer midnight negotiations about who stole the warm spot. A little practical magic rounds things out. A sprig of rowan or a knot of red thread is tied at the bed's head, not as decoration but as a tiny net for bad things. Not everything here is chapel. Some customs are as old as hedges, and people keep what helps. Scholars debate still whether these apotropaic bits were taught as play-spooned as doctrine, or simply absorbed like the smoke in your hair. You don't resolve it. You just tie the thread and feel how the chest loosens fraction by fraction when a ritual gives your worries a place to sit. Someone asks, practical as bread, how long will it keep this shape? You answer with your hands, flip it every few nights. Pull out the worst knots. In the morning, prop it to breathe by the door when the weather is decent so the damp goes out instead of in. When spring comes, the best bits will find a second career lining hen baskets. The rest will become fuel for the compost heap that swallows peelings and returns cabbages like miracles. Nothing here does only one job. You pat the finished work. It's not luxury. It's leverage against cold. It's not a mattress sale. It's a family agreement performed nightly in straw and patience. You've turned a pile of plant leftovers into a platform for stories, breath heat, and the slow arithmetic of growing. The children clap because clapping is sometimes the only fair wage for good labour. A parent smiles, the kind of tired smile that says warmth equals survival, equals less cough tomorrow, equals more bread kneaded without trembling fingers. You lay your palm on the top, still crisp, not yet body warmed, and you can feel the faint rough hum of the stalks, the way they keep tiny pockets of air like jarred sunshine. You're about to lay the first blanket and hear how fabric and straw become a single hush. But something else is arriving at the edge of your senses, curling through the room. On a gentle loop, the smell you kept brushing aside suddenly centres itself. Dry, bright, grassy sweet with a note of harvest rain. It's not perfume, it's place. It settles into your hair, into the blanket, into the night itself, promising a different kind of sleep than feathers give a barnyard lullaby. You pause, nose tilted, letting the aroma write a memory on your nerves. But the next duty was even stranger. You lower yourself into the straw, and the first thing that greets you isn't touch, it's scent. A soft golden cloud that lifts from the bed, as if summer decided to hover here for one more song. The smell is not fancy, it's honest. It's the breath of fields after the scythe of sun-tough stalks, and rain remembered of grain already eaten, and goodness left behind. You breathe through your nose like you've been told in every relaxation video ever, and the straw answers with a bouquet that sits somewhere between fresh bread crust and a barn door left open to a meadow. It's comfort with a trace of mischief, the way a loaf looks innocent, and then steals your willpower slice by slice. The children know this aroma like a password. They tumble in knees and elbows, a blur of woolen shirts and hedgehog hair, and the straw puffs up around them, releasing more of its hay-sweet laughter. There's a momentary chorus of as bodies find channels, then a shared exhale that comes out in harmony, as if they've practiced all week. You nestle in shoulder to shoulder with human radiators, whose operating instructions are simple. Stay close, keep still, claim blanket, but share heat. The blanket slides over the pile with a woolen hush, a patchwork thing, some squares dyed with madder's muted rose, others a stubborn sheep brown that no dye ever convinced. Your cheek finds a smooth patch of ticking, and you catalogue every scent as if you're doing your own medieval perfume review. Top notes of dry straw, middle notes of smoky hearth, base notes of lanolin and persistence. A mainstream historical fact tucks itself under your ear, straw bedding. The palliasse wasn't just for the poor, though the poor had it most. Even in wealthier homes, servants and children often slept on straw ticks with feather beds, reserved for the adults or the honoured. In some regions, the straw lived inside a wooden box bed, a curtained nook that held heat and privacy at once, while in others it sprawled honestly beside the fire, democratising warmth. The scent you're breathing isn't incidental. It's a genuine medieval sleep ambience, as predictable as the church bell that will later tell you whether your dreams have wandered past matins. Speaking of bells, listen for them. Outside the cottage, the night is big but not empty, and somewhere beyond the hedgerows a church tower keeps time like a patient metronome for souls. The faint tinny echo arrives as if it's travelled through wool softened by distances and weather one then another beads on a thread. The children hardly twitch. This soundtrack is their normal. To you, each strike rings like a tiny reminder that you're sleeping in a world organised by hours named for prayers, Compline behind you, matins and lords ahead, and you're tucked into a straw-scented cradle midway stealing warmth before roosters stake their claim on the morning. Here's a quirky tidbit to fold into the aroma where lavender or southernwood grew, and where coin or garden space permitted households sometimes mixed a handful into the straw, not to be fancy, but to wage a subtle war on pests. Pennyroyal rue and tansy were not bedtime lullabies so much as chemical policies written by plants. They sent a memo to fleas and lice that read, "Find another party." If you sift the bed with your fingers, you might even find a sprig or two crisp as paper and sharply green when crushed. The smell edges the straw's sweetness with a bitter minty note that makes your nose feel like it learned a new word. You shift and learn the grammar of this bed. Straw is not a mattress that erases you, it remembers. If you carve a groove with your hip, the groove nods and says, "Yes, that is where you go." Children press into their appointed courses like river channels. The littlest curls against your stomach in a comma the way commas save sentences from running away. Light joke number 1, congratulations, you've become a punctuation mark in a paragraph of people very on brand for a bedtime story. The warmth gathers by degrees the way bread gathers a crust, and the smell lifts and settles with every move, a low tide, a high tide, always returning to that hay-sweet centre. Now for a small scholarly tangle braided into all this coziness, historians still argue about the exact degree and duration of co-sleeping among medieval children and their parents. Prescriptive literature often scolds against inordinate mingling, a polite way of saying moralists preferred tidy sleeping arrangements. Yet court records, household accounts and travellers' complaints suggest that necessity laughed cheerfully at tidy. One bed, many bodies. Some read the admonitions as proof that mixed sleeping was common enough to worry about. Others think the writers were performing a pious ideal more than describing daily life. You in your bed of evidence and elbows can feel the economy deciding for everyone's space is small, winter is large, and straw plus bodies is a practical trinity. The scent turns storyteller again. Different grains have different voices. Oat straw is sweeter and springier. Rye straw is sturdy and a little sour wheat somewhere in the diplomatic middle. If your nose is patient, you can almost guess the field. Another quirky detail. New straw fresh after harvest carries a brighter greener smell, while old straw grows hushed and bready. In damp seasons it can sour, which is how you learn to sun the tick on fine days, beating it with a switch, until dust and indignation fly together. In some places, rushes, those flat marsh stalks, were strewn on floors, and sometimes layered under the bedding. They have a reedy pond-edge smell that shows up like a cameo when the straw is thin. Gently now, the blanket's weight is the last ingredient. It presses the smell closer to your face, warmifying it, turning straw notes into a kind of tea you drink through the nose. You wonder if this is why memories cling to wool, the way scents ride the lanolin like boats. Your eyes find the fire's afterglow and you notice something so practical it's almost poetry, the heads all point the same way. Not an accident. Breath and warmth move across faces in one direction, and feet find the warmed stone at the end. The smell maps to positions. Hair smells like smoke at the top. Straw smells like bread at the sides. Dog smells like dog wherever he pleases. A mainstream fact wrapped in that moment, parents often placed infants in separate cradles near the hearth or at the bed's edge to avoid the real danger of overlaying accidental smothering in crowded beds, while older children graduated to the family heap. Swaddling too enters the scene as a practical technology, long bands wrapping a baby snugly to limit flailing near open flames and restless siblings. And here's another debate with a scholarly aftertaste. Some argue swaddling was nearly universal and prolonged. Others point to regional variation and class differences, suggesting more flexibility than the manuals imply. In this cottage you see a cradle's dark outline and hear a baby's sigh shaped like a bean sprout. The straw's smell drifts over even that little boat and everyone floats on the same gentle tide. Light joke number 2 arrives with your nose. You're at this moment a sommelier of cereal stalks, detecting notes of August and a finish of "Please stop poking me, random straw." You shift once more. compressing the bed into compliance, and the smell briefly blooms with a crisp straw apple snap that makes you think of scythes and the quiet manners of late afternoon. Your ears loyal to the bells catch another faint peal through the thatch, maybe a half-hour marker, or maybe just someone testing the clapper. Whichever it is, the sound slides into your bones and tells them to unclench. You're in a world that divides the night into named pieces, each with a scent, a sound, a duty. The straw's perfume belongs to the piece called Rest While Embers Hold. The children settle deeper into that name, and you let the smell become a blanket all by itself. One more curious tidbit, because the nose loves company. Some households stitched little sachets, linen pockets of herbs to hang at the bedhead, or pinned to a cap portable whiffs of virtue that promised sweet breath and sweeter dreams. Others rubbed the tick with vinegar water on washing days, a sharp tang that cut through barnyard notes and then evaporated into clean. You imagine vinegar joining straw in your personal sleep playlist, first a bright soprano, then silence leaving the meadow to sing lead. Now the practical ending of the section's rhythm mainstream fact quirky detail debate done. You yawn, not the flashy kind, but the kind that folds like a blanket corner, and watch the ember's last orange eyelash fall closed. The scent hovers less talkative now, more like a friend keeping watch at the edge of your pillow. Your breathing slows. The pile around you becomes a single animal, many-hearted, steady. In that soft drift you hear a familiar weight tap the floorboards, followed by a whisk of tail and the faint dog breath of someone who's been auditing your sleep preparations and found them promising. But the next duty was even stranger. The dog gets there first because of course he does. He has seniority, a coat that pretends to be a blanket, and a personal policy that states all straw belongs to him until proven otherwise. He turns in a tight ceremonial spiral, presses his shoulder into the palliasse to test for give, and then settles so close to your shins that you could knit socks from his warmth alone. His breath is a small bellows, rhythmic, reassuring, carrying the perfume of everything he supervised today. Smoke rain, a hint of stolen turnip, and that mysterious odour ditch that only dogs find glamorous. You reach down, and your fingers find the soft place behind his ear, the spot that turns his spine to licorice. He's officially off duty, but his ears still pivot when the wind touches the shutter, as if each gust is a memo he should initial. Animals here are not guests, they're colleagues in the family economy. Even the dog, you think, earns his place on payroll as a space heater and an alarm with teeth. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, your bed now comes with a built-in burglar alarm, no batteries, just bacon. The children fold themselves around him without a word because this arrangement is ancestral. Warm core, furry border, everyone inside the circle. The blanket descends, and dog plus straw plus people becomes a single braided heat engine that hums on low. Mainstream historical fact tucked politely between paws in much of medieval Europe, especially the north and west animals and humans shared living space in various configurations. In byre houses and longhouses, cattle occupied one end of the building, and people the other, often with only a low partition. In winter, that bovine furnace lifted the indoor temperature by several forgiving degrees. Even in cottages without cattle inside, dogs and cats circulated through sleeping spaces as working partners, ratters, guardian scrap inspectors, and yes, as living hot water bottles. It wasn't sentimentality so much as thermodynamics with a wagging tail. You shift, and the dog makes that soft inverted sneeze snuffle dogs use to say I approve. His warmth seeps into your calves like tea into a cup. From the rafters, a cat performs the night's opening monologue, a single disdainful murr, followed by the acrobatics of descent beam-covered bench straw. She lands like a rumour on your hip and kneads the blanket with tiny terrible biscuits, before curling into a comma that echoes the youngest child's shape. If you listen close, her purr is a thread, and if you follow it, you can stitch your mind to sleep. A quirky tidbit slips in on soft paws, some medieval doors show evidence of early cat holes, small cutouts that let mousers patrol even when humans barred the way. In written records, cats and small dogs appear as line items, given scraps granted names, sometimes left bequests of a cloak or a bowl in eccentric wills. There are dog names in English records that read like a comedy list, Nosewise Holdfast Troy Jackie. Elsewhere you find Tib for cats or simply the Mauser. Are these outliers or typical? You won't solve it tonight, but the idea that a hound called Holdfast once claimed a straw bed beside a child called Alice feels perfectly possible under this roof. The air performs a duet with fur. Dog smell plus straw smell is not perfume counter beautiful, but it's the right fragrance for a room that builds its own weather. Your nose registers lanolin ghosts from the blanket, a faint iron from the hearth stones, and the wild green breath of the cat's coat, which somehow always smells like hedge, even when she swears she has never left the settle. Your hearing adjusts too from human murmurs to animal micro-sounds, the tick of dog claws as a dream runs his feet down a phantom lane, the whiskery snuffle of a cat deciding whether your ribs are an island or a bridge, the diagnostic sigh of a cow in a neighbouring shed turning her cud like a slow moon if your cottage happens to back onto a byre. Here's your scholar's tangle for the night, warm and furry around the edges. Historians still argue about how affectionate medieval people were with animals, and how often those animals were allowed into the bed proper. Moralists wrote against excess familiarity sermons, compared sinful people to pampered dogs under tables, and sumptuary attitudes frowned on spending too much on pets. Yet archaeology marginal doodles in manuscripts and court tales show animals woven through daily life with a matter-of-fact tenderness. Were pets pets in the modern sense? Sometimes yes, often no. Mostly they were working animals who also earned nicknames crumbs, and the kind of absent-minded strokes a hand gives when the brain is tired and thankful. Tonight in your straw, the debate curls up and sleeps with its tail over its nose, because utility and affection are not mutually exclusive when it's freezing. Practicality pads on. Animals redistribute heat. A medium-sized dog radiates like a small hearthstone, and a cat is basically a portable ember. There's a reason grandmothers later swore by bed dogs heavy logs to warm the feet, and why your feet right now are smuggling themselves under the dog's belly like travellers into a friendly inn. You can feel the thermal map shift child cores warm the centre. Dog guards the foot climate. Cat monopolises the hip district. Edges cool, but not cruelly. If you had cattle inside the house, which many families did in the dead of winter to protect them and to harness their heat, you'd notice the air holds a sweeter damp, a low animal fog that smooths the sharpness of the cold. Some longhouses even slope the floor toward the animal's end to manage drainage, a detail your nose appreciates more than your imagination. Like joke number 2, your mattress now offers canine memory foam TM. It remembers the exact shape of a dog pressed against it and refuses to forget until morning. You try to move and the bed says kindly file a request in triplicate. The dog does not endorse movement unless it increases petting. And then there are the little economies of sound. A dog's growl has a grammar your bones understand. It says fox in the yard, stranger on the lane, or nothing at all, but I needed to rehearse. A cat's sudden stare into the dark is either a tiny demon audit, or more likely a moth auditioning for sainthood in the candle flame. When both go still at once, you feel the hush like a hand on the door, a pause, a listening. Nothing happens and the room exhales together. You add one light joke, careful and drowsy if the dog ever learns to bank the fire and the cat picks up mending, you can retire and let them run the household. Mainstream fact again, widen to the village, many medieval households organise sleeping in layers. Elders to the wall, children, central animals, opportunistic. Not every night, not every house, but often enough that travellers wrote it down, and artists sketched it in margins where a dog steals a crumb as a monk snores. You live it now, the dog's tail thumps once under the blanket, then stills. The cat's purr slides into silence that isn't silence, just a lower note under breathing. Another quirky sliver in some places, children kept small crude whistles or carved charms near the bed in the shape of animals. Roosters, hounds, hares, tokens of luck, playthings, or perhaps little wardens against the nightmare. Whether those toys slept with them or simply watched from a peg, their presence suggests the way animal life saturated imagination. You think of the carved dog head on a bench arm, chipped but faithful, and feel less alone. The scholarly debate takes one more stretch where animal-inclusive beds, a sign of depravity, poverty, or simple cold. Church courts chided clerics for keeping hunting dogs in their chambers. Physicians warned about miasmas. Satirists mocked old ladies doting on lapdogs. But the same centuries gave you bestiaries that moralized animals into saints and sinners saints who befriended wolves in legend and households that named their hounds with pride. Historians sought sources like you sorted straw, pulling the sharp pieces, keeping the springy ones. And still the answer remains regional, seasonal, practical. Tonight the practical wins. The dog is warm, the cat is content. You're a paragraph inside a paragraph and the whole page reads, keep everyone alive till dawn. Your senses take roll call, touch, fur scratch, weight, scent, straw, animal, musk, wool, sound, breath, rustle, distant bell, sight embers making low red punctuation across the floor. Everything reports present. The room settles, not in silence, but in agreeable murmur, a barn lullaby carrying all the right instruments. The dog dreams and runs, just briefly, just enough to tap out a tiny rhythm on your ankles that makes the smallest child giggle in his sleep, and then sigh the sigh that locks a night into place. You angle your toes toward the warmed stone at the foot of the bed and think not for the first time that comfort is made of small, shameless thefts. From dogs, from cats, from stalks of straw, from cows breathing warmer air into a winter that forgot how to be kind. Your job is just to be grateful and to share. You pull the blanket up, tucking it under the dog's chin, because of course you do, and the cat opens one eye in judgment and closes it again in forgiveness. You're almost gone now, drifting toward the slow blue part of the night where dreams wander the lanes and come back with damp feet. But just as your breath aligns with the rooms, the dog's head lifts, not alarmed exactly, but curious, that held breath curiosity that turns every sleeper into a hinge. But the next duty was even stranger. You lift the patchwork blanket and it answers with a hush, thick enough to hear a woolen tide rolling over straw and knees, gathering strays and stubborn elbows into one obedient coastline. It's heavy in an honest way, the weight of sheep and rain and hands. When it settles, the room seems to exhale and flatten into calm like flour patted smooth before bread happens. You pinch the edge and feel everything the eye can't see, the nap raised by teasels, the denser belly, where the fullers stomped it into discipline, the seams where old cloaks reincarnated as squares. It's not just a cover, it's history stitched for warmth. Wool carries weather in its bones. Stroke it and your fingers come back with a soft ghost of grease lanolin that never entirely leaves a polite waterproofing the sheep, engineered long before your toes were born. The blanket smells faintly of pasture after rain, with a background hum of smoke from nights like this one, and a downright practical note of we dried it near onions last Tuesday. You draw it up to your chin and feel the way weight persuades muscles to quit their gossip. Your shoulders release grudges you didn't know they held. Light joke number 1, congratulations, you've discovered the medieval weighted blanket, pre-electric, sheep-powered, clinically approved by every sleepy child since harvest. Mainstream historical fact tucked like a hot stone at your feet. For most households, warmth was a wool economy. Peasants slept under thick, coarsely woven covers, sometimes just a broadcloth mantle doing double duty, sometimes a lighter linen sheet beneath, if luck and laundry allowed, sometimes nothing but the robe off your own back. Wealthier beds multiplied layers, sheets of linen against skin, heavy-fulled blankets above, and for the very fortunate a feather bed and bed curtains to tame the draught into courtly manners. Quilts, as you imagine them pieced and puffed, were rare birds in medieval Europe. The word quilt existed, yes, but pointed mostly to quilted garments, and padded covers stitched through less about patchwork art and more about insulation and pokey straw management. Lean into the texture. Some squares near your shoulder were dyed long ago and have faded to the memory of a colour mad as red, now rust. Weld's cheerful yellow, now chamomile tea. Wode's blue, now a stubborn bruise that refuses to leave. One strip is undyed, a pride of sheep brown that laughs at the very idea of dye. Another square is smoother, maybe a survivor of a better household's cast-off rehomed and loved into this common-sense geometry. Run your nails lightly and you catch against tiny burr scars and the occasional coarse guard hair. The carders missed on candle-lit evenings, when eyes grew blurry and gossip grew interesting. Quirky tidbit whispered along the seam, those teasels that raised the nap. Many were grown like royalty in their spiky gardens. Fuller's teasel, Dipsacus sativus, a plant whose dried heads beat every metal comb for coaxing wool into fluffy obedience without shredding it. In shops and by streams, clothmen talked about teasels like modern people talk about espresso machines, favourite batches, ideal moisture the way a head wears down season by season. And if you were truly thrifty, you might own a handcart of thistle or hedgehog stand-in because the world is full of spiky volunteers eager to join the craft. You negotiate fairness with the blanket, it hoards heat like a dragon unless managed. The oldest child on the edge tugs to stop draft leaks. The smallest is swallowed right up to the nose until only 2 serious eyes remain above a wool horizon. You tuck the corners under bodies the way you'd tuck in bread edges before baking purposeful a bit bossy. The dog egalitarian philosopher that he is accepts the blanket's jurisdiction with a groan of bliss and a stomp of both back legs. Your feet search the foot of the bed and find the warmed stone again, now tempered by the blanket, into something like a sunset you can touch. Listen. The sensory anchor. Tonight is rain. A new actor entering its scene. Clouds have negotiated their contract with the moon, and now the thatch begins a quiet drumline, first scattered ticks, then a soft close roar, not storm-born, just steady and domestic. Rain on thatch is a lullaby with professional training. Each drop meets straw above you and spends its anger there. By the time the sound reaches your ears, all the edges have been sanded off. The blanket's weight partners with that rain, and together they convince you the world has decided to become small, warm, and none of your business. Somewhere a gutter stone channels the excess with a hollow glug. Somewhere a leaky shutter develops opinions. Inside, wool makes its little climate. Outside, the fields sign their water receipts. Another mainstream note you can test with your fingers: blankets were not all woven equal. Coarse homespun for most, yes, but towns with guilds produced broadcloth fulled, sheared and dense, capable of turning wind into rumour. Fullers marched cloth in troughs with water, and fuller's earth a clay that pulls grease, or pounded it in mills where hammers did the marching, thickening fabric until it shrugged at draughts. The result is in your hands, a piece that resists your pinch, springs back and lies with the authority of a small sermon. Scholarly debate hums from the footboard like a sympathetic string. How often did peasant households use linen sheets under wool blankets? Prescriptive texts and aristocratic accounts champion sheets for neatness, comfort and laundering. Archaeological textiles and wallet realities suggest many families skipped linen entirely, or limited it to a treasured tablecloth and a baptismal piece. Some argue regional flax cultures made linen more common than we imagine. Others counter with inventories that list a sheet as a singular precious item guarded like gossip. Tonight you've got a scratchy but proud half sheet over the straw, and under the blanket, and your skin votes in favour, even as your laundry future votes against. Hold up a corner to the light and you can play detective. See the twill, the diagonal that runs like whispering wind across the weave. That's sturdy stuff. The plain weave squares are older, more honest, but they let drafts edit your sleep unless the nap is well raised. The seams are whip-stitched with homespun thread that thickens in places, thins in others, a biography of evenings spent near firelight with a needle that knew your fingers better than you did. On one square, someone embroidered a tiny red cross, the discreet signature of a hand or a memory that this piece once rested on a cradle. The blanket is not one thing, it's a census. Quirky bedtime maintenance delivered with a wink, moths do not pay rent. Herbs are the eviction notices. Lavender if you can spare the scent, southernwood if you can't walnut leaves where that's the tradition. Some households stored blankets in chests by summer with a crust of bay or rosemary, or smoked them briefly near the hearth, because even moths dislike odour bacon, and for washing well. Full washings were rare. Wool sulks when drowned and loses some of its personality. Spot cleaning ruled the day, and airing on frostbright mornings let cold do holy work on odours. If you lean into the blanket now, you catch the honest proof of that strategy. Fresh air note first, then the wool hymn, then a faint story of spilled porridge that has long since learned humility. Light joke number 2 arrives as a shrug under your chin. If you count sheep to sleep here, it's technically a family reunion, and the blanket has notes. You doze between numbers 7 and 8, while number 9 files a complaint about elbows. Rain thickens. The thatch answers like a soft crowd. A distant cart goes by wheels thick with mud, the sound of a tired circle turning into tomorrow. The blanket's weight makes promises your day can't keep yet. It says that you are safe in a museum made by need, that warmth is a group project where wool gets the loudest vote. Your breath discovers a slower cadence to match the roof. Inhale on the scatter, exhale on the swell. The whole house teaching your lungs how to be citizens of the night. Bring the scholar's tangle, closer colour and law. Sumptuary rules in some places scolded against ostentation. Dyes were labour and money. Did peasants sleep under bright patchworks? Probably not in the profusion of later centuries' quilts. But scraps happened. Cast-offs trickled down, and any piece that kept a shoulder from the draft earned admission without paperwork. The bold reds and blues you see in manuscript margins belonged more often to painted fantasies and elite chambers. In cottages like this, tones softened into earth and smoke, which under candlelight become almost gold anyway. You shift your kneecap into a kinder pocket. The blanket resists, then forgives. Someone near your left ear begins the bedtime prayer in a voice that has been walking all day. It comes out as a half-hummed melody, the kind a pot might make if it believed. Another child adds the crisp, clicking amen of a tongue against teeth, and then the room goes pure, bright quiet, not silence, never silence, but a quiet, where every sound wears slippers. Even the dog sighs like a librarian approving your footnote. One more quirky thing before your jaw loses its enthusiasm for words, nettle fibre happened. In lean linen years, crafty souls turned nettles into thread stingless when processed surprisingly soft. If a family possessed a nettle sheet, it could live under a blanket like this, and tell a very specific story about thrift knowledge and hands that refuse to let a plant be only one thing. If you ever wondered what ingenuity smells like, it's somewhere between green tea and stubbornness. The blanket, doing what blankets do best, moves this section toward its sleepy station. It convinces stray toes to commit to warmth. It edits out small arguments. It drafts a treaty with the draft. Your eyes perform the old theatre trick where embers become a small red city and shadows commute home by lanes. Like joke number 3, you're not falling asleep, you're simply conducting rigorous research into gravity's effects on eyelids in wool-heavy atmospheres. Your last thought before the night cleverly removes it is that this blanket has attended more bedtimes than any song, that it has caught tears and porridge and secrets and the lint of years, and that in the ledger where the village keeps its real accounts, the person who mended this seam here, this one you're touching, should be paid in bread and gratitude. Rain presses a little closer and the thatch lowers its voice to a purr. You think the duties of the night are done, straw-arranged animals settled, blanket negotiated, but there's one more ritual older than the roof and sharper than the rain that steps out of the dark like a memory with chilly feet. But the next duty was even stranger. You don't fall into sleep. You walk there on words. Tonight the road is short and whispery. The blanket has settled. The dog's furnace is lit. Rain has signed a peace treaty with the thatch. And now the house does the old low ceremony it knows by heart. The candle is a little sun training for retirement wobbling on its wick. Beeswax sighs into honeyed air and becomes the section's quiet metronome. You breathe in that soft sweetness fields of clover, compressed into a thumb of light, and feel your shoulders forget what they were arguing about. Somewhere at the far end of the lane, a bell carries one thin note on the damp, as if to confirm that yes, the world is still arranged in hours, and this one belongs to closing. A parent's voice begins like the rustle of a sleeve pater noster quies in caelis. The Latin is honest and a little crooked at the edges because words learned by ear have their own dialect, and this family speaks parish. You answer in the democracy of murmurs, a chorus of not quite syllables, the way a schoolroom hums when everyone knows the tune but no one wants to solo. Then comes the vernacular, a hush that fits better in small mouths. Our Father. The house seems to lean closer to the hearth to listen. The dog's ears relax, and you, professional sleeper in training, feel the rhythm of prayer settle your breath into a metered line. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you've joined the midnight choir. Robes optional, snoring not strictly forbidden. Mainstream historical fact slipped under your tongue like a lozenge. Medieval knights very often ended the waking part with prayer. Compline, the final canonical hour, belonged to monasteries in full dress, but echoed in cottage shorthand Pater Noster Ave Maria Creed, if memory allowed a sign of the cross traced on brow and breast, like closing a book you hope to reopen. In some houses, beads click softly, Pater Noster chords with big knots for big prayers, little knots for little ones, so even the fingers can keep time when the mind wanders down the day's hedgerows. A whispered God keep us is the period at the end of the sentence. Sleep begins with grammar. The candle makes a meniscus of light in its little pool of wax. Beeswax is a mood, and it's also a ledger. It holds the thumbprint of the person who pinched it to a stub. It keeps the memory of summer's work, hundreds of bees commuting golden miles to finance this one small wobbling sun. You sniff and catch the clean, warm scent of hive and blossom, and a little smoke from patience itself. That's tonight's sensory anchor thread. Fine wick, slow drop of wax air that tastes like honey read a psalm. After the creeds, the room turns to local weather charms and customs, some older than the chapel and all older than the dog. Cross of Christ, guard us, someone whispers, and a tiny red thread knotted earlier gets a second pat at the bed's head. A sprig of rowan watches from the lintel, quiet as a doorkeeper. The littlest, solemn as a bishop, sprinkles 3 imaginary grains of salt on the blanket's edge, because someone told them salt makes bad things thirsty enough to leave. You might smile gently because this is not superstition in a sneer. It's housekeeping for the soul, the way you bank the fire so it behaves in the dark. Quirky tidbit, bright as a mote in candlelight on Epiphany. Many households chalked their door lintels with C+, M plus B, and the year Caspar Melchior Balthazar. To some Christus Mansionum Benedicat Christ. Bless this house to others. The chalk stays months, a pale, pious eyebrow over the threshold that tells rain and travellers and worries alike that this interior has a name and a protection policy. In Ireland and parts of Britain, a St. Brigid's cross of rushes might sit near the hearth, woven in quick, clever squares by hands that also know how to plait straw for bedding. It's the same grammar applied to fire and sleep. Cross the lines, trap the draught, keep the household round. Now the knight's little theology lesson arrives on Barefeet the mare. Not a horse, but the thing that rides chests and turns breath into a stone, the nightmare, the night mara, the press that mothers warn and grandmothers charm away. 3 times spit, 3 times cross, someone mutters into the blanket, and a pair of small thumbs cross their own foreheads with military seriousness. Scholars still argue, here's your debate whether these old wives' protections were fringe frowned-upon survivals or mainstream domestic religion with a practical face. Ecclesiastical writers sometimes thundered against charms. Confessors' manuals listed forbidden mutters, yet church porches sold blessed candles. Parish priests lent holy water, and villagers laced God's names and herb wisdom into one long cord against the dark. Was it syncretism, prudence, or simply the fact that fear sleeps where warmth does historians place the bookmarks in different places? Your bed places them all at once because beds are complicated libraries. The prayers turn personal. Children get their inventory of blessings. Grandma's cough, Dad's back the black hen that forgot where she lays the thatch, that could please leak less over mother's settle. Someone whispers for the soul of a neighbour whose cart tipped last Martinmas, and for his wife who still looks like weather. Another child adds a request that the dog stop chasing saints in his sleep. Light joke number 2, smuggled under a grin you consider praying for an end to elbows, but decide that might be beyond the current papal brief. You can feel the room's pulse slow as each quiet petition ties off a loose thread from the day. The candle nods and nods agrees, then gives a small blue yawn and steadies itself. Overhead, smoke braids into the thatch and takes its time choosing a direction. Your fingers find the texture of the blanket's seam and without making a decision, begin counting stitches like a lay bead substitute. The catechism of touch joins the catechism of words. You discover a worn place and bless the unknown mender with a private thanks, because in this house salvation often arrives as a needle. Mainstream fact again sprinkled like holy water at the footboard. Much of what got prayed at the end of the day was about safety. Fire thieves, wolves, childbirth, crop blight, sudden storms, these were not abstractions, they were neighbours. Bedtime pulled the nets tight around them. In some regions, people left a lamp burning low, a less blessed but very practical angel, that reduced the likelihood of tripping on a stool while visiting the chamber pot, or knocking a live coal into straw. In others, light was shut with the door and the night was trusted to God and the watchman's staff. The watchman. There's a thought. Somewhere outside, a staff taps a rhythm on the lane, not close but present. All's well, the sound says without words, and you feel the village as a large animal going to sleep in sections. A cow sighs, then a cartyard door hums as it learns its latch, then a baby's thin thread of complaint is woven into the blanket of rain. You place your next breath carefully under the watchman's beat, and feel the bed become a boat. Beeswax smell becomes tidal. Words become oars that will be stored when they've done their laps. Another quirky bead on the string, some families turned a spoon or a knife with the edge outward on a windowsill. Not as a weapon, but as a sign, a tiny no pointed at whatever rides gutters and creeps in at dreams. Elsewhere, a broom leaned across a doorway, not to block people, but to entangle anything, not people in a polite puzzle of straw. Are these Christian? The question is modern. The family that knows them would say they're human, and they work. The parish priest might raise a brow, or might nod and tell you to keep the bowels regular and the faith similar. The candle gives a cousin of a sneeze and crouches lower in its holder. Beeswax tears run down the side and harden into ridges like a tiny geology lesson. Volcanic flows of prayer set into amber. You tilt the stub drip 3 slow drops in a line, and press a curled edge of paper into them so the flame won't wander. The room admires your engineering. Light joke number 3. If there were a guild for bedtime safety, You'd be fast-tracked for your wax management and blanket tuck certifications. You can feel the section's cadence lengthening words, choosing longer roads, because sleep is almost here, soft-footed and unassuming, eager to curl behind your knees. But the ritual has one more stitch to set. The parent raises the last line like a lid, matins will come fast. May the Lord keep us till cockcrow. A cross is traced in the air over the bed, the kind children can feel on closed eyelids. The dog rearranges a sigh. The cat becomes heavier by doing nothing at all, the way cats make gravity their vocation. Your mouth shapes an amen that sounds like a yawn wearing a halo. Scholars would tell you over bread tomorrow that the boundary between prayer and folk habit is as braided as the cords that tie the palliace. That books and bodies argued and courted each other for centuries in this space where fear and hope trade ringers. Tonight you don't need the footnotes, though. You're grateful for the people who collected them. You just need the last small hush that slides down from the rafters, like a hand over a child's hair smoothing sleep into its proper part in the household. The candle leans. The wick gives a final coal-bright blink, then retires like a polite elder. The beeswax smell lingers orphaned but cheerful, and the dark steps closer without teeth. Words have done their work. Breath takes over. Your last thought is not a thought, but a litany of gentle items: wax wool, rain bell breath, dog straw. Every one of them coins stamped with keep. You're almost gone when a new sound, small and real as a button, taps the edge of hearing a hollow clink from the water pail near the door, followed by the slow scrape of a wooden lid and the stealthy tiptoe of someone who has just remembered the night has a rule about coals and midnight. But the next duty was even stranger. You hear the house speak before you fully drift timber. Grammar nail dialect, a fluent creak that only old wood knows. It starts in the rafters, a small question asked by a beam that has held up more winters than you've had breakfasts. The answer comes from the far wall with a sigh that sounds like a door remembering a story. You're lying very still, but the building keeps moving, wood swells and settles with the rain in the thatch. Joints think about their vows and renew them with tiny ceremonial groans. If you listen the way you listen to a shell for the sea, the cottage has a tide, a slow swell of hush, a soft withdrawal of sound, and then a returning trickle of the world rends in the eaves, a mouse like a pin with feet. Your new sensory anchor is timber, the faint resin ghost of old pine, the beeswax polish from some long-ago feast day rubbed into a cupboard door, the dusty amber breath of oak that knows how to keep a roof from gossiping with the sky. Every creak has a map. The beam above you always lets out a small hair when the night first turns wet. The settle by the hearth answers with a shrug whenever someone changes position on the bed. The pegs that pin the frame together complain like cousins at a wedding and then behave themselves because, well, family. A mouse begins its errand. You can hear it the way you hear your own breath at the edge of sleep. A tiny patent leather patter, a whisper rip through a basket reed, a pause so dramatic you want to applaud. The cat, who's already a comma on your hip, opens one judgmental eye, takes a silent attendance of all sin within 3 cubits, and then decides the mouse must live till morning because sleep is a sacrament, and her union rules are strict. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you have been promoted to Night Watch honorary reporting to a cat who will schedule your performance review for never. Mainstream historical fact tucked into the attic like a spare ladder. Medieval houses hosted small life. Rushes on floors invited crumbs. Grain stores invited guests. Wattle and daub walls left busy galleries where a mouse could live a full and rewarding career. Cats and small dogs were not decoration. They were the pest control department, with benefits the reason bread survived long enough to become breakfast, and the reason you sometimes woke to the crunch of justice under the settle. Owls patrolled the outside barn owls and little owls in some regions, turning night into a soundtrack of soft wing and hollow call. If you're lucky tonight, the distant kiwick of a hunting owl will fold into the rain and make you feel like the field itself has pulled a blanket to its beak. You catch it, the owl's thin, trumpet-quiet note blown through straw, and weather like a message on parchment, present listening patient. Somewhere a vole makes a poor decision, somewhere a field edge takes a breath. The house replies with its own hymn of survival, the dog's regular bellows, the cat's tiny motor, a child's sigh that rises like bread. Your ears now trained can tell wood from animal, from weather, from the little theatre of straw. The longer you listen, the kinder it all sounds, as if the night has decided to read you a book about how everything keeps working when you let it. A quirky tidbit scurries in with the mouse. In many towns, people called the poorest parish folk church mice lean as a collection plate after Easter. The term survives long after tonight, but the truth here is more literal churches themselves had mice, which is why you sometimes see carved cats in choir stalls and little stone mousers tucked into corners in the way clever carvers like to hide jokes. Bestiaries talked about mice with moral agendas, gnawing sin, stealing grain like thieves of virtue. Real life talked back by putting a cat at the bed foot. Elsewhere in the countryside, harvest mice weave spherical nests in tall grasses, little green globes like secret fruit. If one ever turned up in the thatch when repairs were due, some families took it as a sign of luck, and others as a reminder to store the grain higher than ambition. The rafters add a new paragraph, a long, slow complaint that resolves into quiet as the thatch sheds a heavier sheet of rain. That's wood talking to weather, and the conversation has gone on since the first time someone hammered mortise to tenon and said to a tree, "Please be a house now." Scholars will tell you here's your debate that the soundscape of a medieval night was louder than we imagine livestock inside, people snoring carts in muddy lanes, or quieter than we imagine, no engines, no far-off hum, only natural voices. The argument is not settled because loud is a matter of reference. If you grew up under oaks and thatch, the owl is your clock, and the beam's protest is your lullaby, not noise. What we call quiet and loud are not universal categories. They are neighbourhoods in the ear. Historians still argue. Your ears decide that tonight is rich, not loud. You reach out and lay your palm flat on the blanket, feeling the vibration of a child's tiny snore, and above it the slow, patient stress relief of wood-shifting load from nail to peg to joint, the whole frame arguing convincingly against gravity. Timber-framed houses especially whisper this way. Greenwood seasons in place then grows steadier with age, like a tenor that finds baritone late in life. In stone cottages with heavy beams, your roof, tonight the creaks are deeper, older reverberations that ring a little in the stays. Every material has a voice. Wattle and daub walls talk in dry scratches. Board floors complain like old men locating their chairs by sound alone. Thatch answers, rain like hands rubbing wool. Light joke number 2, if you ever need an orchestra and can't afford one, just invite weather over and hand your house a baton. Movement I creak in E minor. Movement 2, mouse scherzo. Movement 3, owl aria with dog drone. Finale, everyone asleep in C major. Another mainstream fact arrives to sit politely at the bed's edge people expected houses to move. They left gaps on purpose, vents in shutters, space above doors because smoke needs an exit and beams need to breathe. Absolute airtightness would have been a nightmare more literal than the mayor. Drafts were enemies, yes, but they were also safety valves, and a well-kept thatch was a living roof home not only to straw, but to small tolerated tenants that ate other less tolerated tenants. You can hear that ecology working right now as spider line hums in a corner, a gnat meets its historian, the owl edits the rodent population with a stern feathery pen. Quirky aside, filed under house makes music when wind comes from a certain quarter the keyhole sings. The note is high and thin, just enough to pass for a ghost if you're 6 and impressionable. Some families hung a small twig or thread near the latch to interrupt the whistle, others let it play because the house is telling time. The same trick happens in roof holes if the smoke flap is set at a half angle, a little flute of weather that once made a visitor swear a monastery kept a secret piper. You grin in the dark because your cottage owns a wind instrument and has chosen to serenade you for free. Now the scholarly tangle with feathers on it, owls in medieval mines wore many costumes. In some regions they symbolized wisdom, quiet watchers, useful killers of vermin. In others they crept into fear, night birds said to carry souls, portend deaths, or announce witches' errands. Bestiaries like to preach about owls as sinners who love the night and shun the light. Yet farmers loved them for obvious reasons, and parish accounts list bounties for raptors that threatened coops, but exceptions for owls that performed public service. So were owls ominous or wholesome? Historians still argue whether the dread outweighed the gratitude, and the answer seems to be yes. It depends on who you asked which owl, what season, and whether your hens had recently hosted a tragedy. The mouse resumes bold, now navigating the woven universe with a sound like a quill testing parchment. You hear the faintest crackle straw discussing boundaries, and then the unmistakable microscopic tisk of a mouse discovering a pebble that ruins a root. The cat's tail gives one judicial twitch, which is essentially a formal warning letter. You exhale carefully so as not to disturb the tribunal, and the mouse, perhaps aware, perhaps not detours toward the door, where the broom leans like a guard whose eyes are closed but ears are not. Your body has learned the bed, so you barely move. The blanket please doles out its heat in a measured grammar. Above a drip finally finds a stubborn root through the thatch, rides, a reed, and lands in the water pail with a hollow plink that marks the hour better than a clock could rain steady thatch. Loyal leak, harmless thirst, tomorrow satisfied. The house adjusts to the drop by micro-tilting a rafter so slight, you feel it only as an extra comfort, like a hand that resettles a pillow without making a show. Light joke number 3 wanders in on soft pause. If your modern sleep app tried to label this soundscape, it would crash at 100% natural white noise file for early retirement and spend its days as a wind chime. You catalogue one last set of noises because that's how your mind makes peace. The ember's little glassy ticks, fire bones settling the wool's tiny hush when someone breathes deeper, blanket sigh, the rush of rain diffused by straw into a million careful patters, roof applause, the owl's far note like a bell that forgot its tower, the mouse's punctuation, the dog's page-turning snore, the beam's sermon on patience. Everything is in its place, even the moving parts. You realise pleasantly drowsily that the cottage isn't an object you sleep in. It's a company you keep a choir, you join a giant instrument that plays alive in a key that matches your pulse. 2 last historical notes slide into the pillows. First, many children slept in lofts when a house had them up under the rafters, closer to creaks and owls farther from the hearth, but also closer to the thatch where heat pooled reluctantly. Ladders were not childproof. They were how little legs learned caution at speed. Second, the rushlight, if your family used one instead of a candle, burned unevenly and sizzled at damp herb joints, adding its own tiny percussion to this concert. That hiss taught bedtime by minutes. When the light reached the next knot you turned, you prayed, you slept, you woke. And here your candle is out, but the house keeps time just the same. At last your body gives in to the timber's lullaby. The building creaks one more kindness into place. The mouse signs off with a last morse of feet. The owl drifts to a farther field where someone else's roots are careless with their secrets. You're going floating driftwood on the slow ink river. But just as the current takes you a sound you didn't expect, soft, deliberate fingers on the latch, maybe only wind impersonating a visitor, maybe something with human timing tests the door and pauses as if to ask whether the night has room for one more custom, before true sleep swallows the house. But the next duty was even stranger. You don't so much wake as surface the way a seal appears where the water is quiet, takes a patient breath and slides back under. The cottage is dark and busy with sleeping. The dark itself feels padded. A small cough breaks it twice, the polite kind that asks the throat to behave, then quiet the sound, already turning into a dream of someone knocking on a faraway door. A snore answers from the opposite flank of the straw bed, deep and agricultural, like a cart rolling over soft earth. The straw shifts in sympathy, tiny stalks realigning with a sigh, and your body understands that you've arrived at the night's intermission, that mysterious interval when everyone pretends not to be awake and absolutely is. The new sensory anchor is ember glow, not flame glow. The hearth is a red pupil watching the room ringed with grey that breathes when a draught wanders past. The coals make small glassy ticks, the sound of patience counting. When you inhale, there's a sweetness not quite smoke, more like bread crust wool, and last hour's apple skin taught to sing. The dog resettles his chin on your ankle, a warm weight that says the watch is being handled by professionals. A child rolls the blanket, readjusts its jurisdiction, and the straw resumes its gentle papery gossip. You lie still, letting the ember's colour press through your eyelids until the red becomes a lake. Mainstream historical fact gently placed where your shoulder meets the mattress. Many people in pre-industrial Europe experienced the night in 2 acts, first sleep and second sleep. The interlude between, sometimes called the watch, wasn't insomnia so much as a scheduled errand stir, the fire visit the chamber pot nurse, a baby pray whisper, or simply listen to the house converse with weather. Court records, medical advice and household manuals nod to it. So do the ways bodies behave when clocks aren't supervisors. You're now in that watch-certified legitimate cozy. You test the air with your toe, seeking the warmed brick at the foot of the bed. Found. Heat hums up your bones the way tea travels through a cold cup, and your calves relax like they've been given back their birthdays. Beside your ear, someone's breathing finds a new rhythm, longer out, and you can tell without seeing that a child has drifted into the twitchy fields where little legs run in place and fingers open and close around invisible treasure. Light joke number 1, the family has entered sleep mode, and you are currently downloading the update called Stillness 2.0, now with fewer elbows. In the dark, your hand finds the rim of a wooden bed mug tucked under the bench. Not glamorous, but essential night water for dry mouths. And if necessary, the other direction too, more on that in a second kindly. You shift carefully. The blanket creaks with authority but grants permission. Someone coughs again, one of those indecisive coughs that can't decide if it wants to live, and the parent nearest the hearth, awake in that absolute parental way, makes a little cluck that says hush in a language older than Latin. A quirky tidbit pads into the watch with bare feet. In some regions, households name the chamber pot the Jordan, a nickname that sailed over centuries. In others, it was just the pot, as honest as mud. Wealthier rooms kept close stools, wooden boxes with a seat, and a lidded bucket beneath, sometimes draped like furniture so dignity could put on a skirt. In cottages like this one, it's simpler: a handled earthenware jar near the door, a quick tilt in the yard at dawn, and an appointment with the ash pile. If you're wincing, the night does not mind. This is practical theology. Everything returns to usefulness. You decide to bank the fire because glowing is cheerful, but ash at morning is better than sulk. Sliding out of the bed is a ceremony. The dog grumbles at the vacancy your leg leaves behind, then takes the space in a land grab so audacious you almost applaud. The floor greets your soul with that cold that makes a breath sound like oh. You tiptoe, which in a room of sleepers means you suddenly have 10 extra joints for silence, to the hearth and kneel. The coals greet you like a congregation. Warm faces wanting a task. You use the poker black iron hand-me-down handle, wrapped in a leather thong that remembers summers, to draw the embers together, then lay 2 husky pieces at angles so a breath will weave between them. A whisper of straw over the top, a splash of ash, a lid of patience. The ember turns from red to the thoughtful darker red that means see you in the morning. Historians still argue here's your scholarly wrinkle about just how universal that 2-sleep pattern was, and whether it held steady across regions, seasons and classes. The evidence is persuasive, but lumpy legal testimonies timed between the first and second sleep physicians recommending activities for the watch sermons, warning against what mischief loves to do when the house is spellbound by darkness. Some scholars suggest segmented sleep faded as street lighting, and stricter work hours rewrote midnight into one long blur. Others argue there was always variety, that the poor, the sick, the nursing and the anxious never unified their nights anyway. Tonight in your straw republic, the watch feels like a civic holiday, solemn, useful, short. You let the poker rest and sit back on your heels. The ember glow makes the smallest city on the hearthstone lanes of ruby alleys of soot, a plaza where one bright coal lives like a saint. Your skin awake now catalogues tiny details: the woolly scratch at your wrist where the blanket brushed you, the sweet and sour breath of the room smoke wool pie of air, the way cool drafts snake through low to test ankles but never head. A mouse writes a single sentence beneath the cupboard. The cat legally off duty declines to edit. Outside, the rain has thinned to the smallest bead curtain. Somewhere very far and soft, water has found a gutter and is practicing its scales. Light joke number 2 arrives in slippers. If your modern sleep coach could see you, it would add ember staring to its list of approved mindfulness exercises and charge you extra for the advanced level called not dropping the poker. You turn toward another duty, the pot. Waterproof dignity is a luxury, but quiet coordination is a skill and you possess it. You lift the little lid, tip your head in apology to the room, and handle necessities with a speed born of cold floors and affection for the continued sleep of others. Practical note: mainstream fact folded into courtesy urine lant, when Stale had a second career in textile work and cleaning. In towns, fullers and dyers bought it by the bucket. In homes, it scoured cloth and set colours stubborn. Morning carried pots to barrels in yards that smelled like work. The night watch, as you've just demonstrated, stocked industry before breakfast. Economies are rarely elegant, but they are consistent. Thirst tapped. Yes. You take one sip from the water mug, cool, faintly tasting of wood, and the ghost of last summer's mint, and tuck it back where fingers can find it at 3 breaths' notice. Then you sit, not quite ready to give yourself back to the bed, listening to the cottage reassemble its hush around the small ripples you made. A child sighs into a deeper valley of straw. There's that secondary rustle, like a book changing chapters, then stillness. The dog's paws twitch twice as he pursues something that deserves it. The Ember City lowers its lamps by one. What to do with the rest of the watch? People have traditions. Some pray short particular prayers that fit between breaths, not the long ones for evenings with more candle. Some couples become quietly married again, a fact every moralist in Europe wrote footnotes about. Some mend one seam too and call that good. Some tell tiny stories, the kind that don't need lanterns or props, the day the goose chased the bishop. The winter, the brook sang in a key everyone could hum, the year the hay smelled like apples. You choose the oldest practice of all you listen to the night until it tells you it is ready to put you away. Another quirky nibble of the watch there were charms for this interval too. Some households dabbed a corner of blessed wax on a child's brow if nightmares came in caravans. Others scratched a star in the ash with the poker's tip, a quiet geometry lesson for spirits who might be confounded by math. Elsewhere, people placed a knife with its edge turned outward on the windowsill not to harm but to signal sharpness to whatever dragged its feet along the eaves. Do these work? Historians will file that under unprovable but beloved, and the families who used them would file it under we slept. The debate creeps back in politely as a cat's whisker: did people use the watch for devotional reading, rosary murmuring, or neighbourly mischief? Sources disagree, often telling on their authors more than on their subjects. A friar scolds, so you imagine brawls and binges. A physician prescribes, so you imagine digestive tranquility and careful pacing. A household account notes the cost of candles, and you imagine brisk candleless habits like yours, short jobs, quick prayers, bed reclaimed while embers keep their appointment with dawn. Like joke number 3 tucked behind a yawn, you consider founding a medieval midnight club membership requirements can bank a fire without swearing, can locate chamber pot in absolute dark, can identify family members by the sound of their snore. Benefits: exemplary coziness, limited edition splinter in left heel. You slip back toward the bed. The blanket, a bureaucrat of warmth, approves your return with a heavy stamp. The dog grants you a loan of ankle space at a predatory interest rate. You insert yourself into the straw's memory into your channel, and feel the bed remember how to float you. Your breathing, which had been doing errands now, applies for a long simple job with no duties. The ember's glow paints your eyelids one last time, then withdraws to its silent office. You let the watch end like a letter without a signature understood, affectionate, filed. Your last useful thought is a practical one. The coals are safe, the pot has been kind, the water will be cool at dawn, and your blanket is a treaty the whole bed believes in. Just as you drift, really drift, the way rivers choose not to fight their beds, you hear a sound inside the room that doesn't belong to coughs, snores, straw, or coals. It is small, it is human, it is a gasp that forgot to be brave, and it comes from the child who sleeps closest to the wall, the child whose dreams have suddenly opened a door you cannot see from where you lie. But the next duty was even stranger. The gasp is small but bright, like a dropped pin in a silent church. You feel it in your ribs before you hear it again. A thin stuck sound from the child pressed to the cold wall, the place where draughts have better aim. Your already half-upright blanket lifting in a slow wave when your hand finds their shoulder warm as bread where it hides from the air. Easy you breathe, and your breath comes back to you with a little shimmer, because tonight's sensory anchor is breath itself, the fog of it, the shared rhythm of it, the way panicked breath draws fast little squares in the cold, while calm breath makes wide circles. In the raftered dark, the family's breathing is a tide. One voice has splashed above it. You slide nearer, making a tunnel of wool where fear can't see. The child's eyes are open and are nowhere near the room yet. They look like a window that forgot who built it. You know this place, they call it the mare when they want to be serious, the night hag when they want to spit. Sleep presses and rides. The chest becomes a door with a stone against it. The mind kicks at shadows with feet it can't find. The child reports the classic geography in a whisper. Something sat on them tight as a loaded sack. A face like a smudge. The feeling that if they could just twitch a finger, the world would come back. You rub small circles on a smaller back and aim your voice at the place where dream and body overlap the way you'd coax a lamb's hoof out of a tangle. Mainstream historical fact laid gently across the blanket, medieval Europe had words and worries for this. Latin texts reused the old physician's term incubus, the citer upon, and sometimes its sister succuba to talk about oppressive, uncanny night visitations. Germanic tongues kept the mare that rides, which is where your modern nightmare gets its horse it never asked for. Physicians blamed humours and supper, preachers blamed sin and spirits. Neighbours told you to cover mirrors at night and keep iron handy. Everyone agreed it felt real enough to stamp your ribs from the inside. If you've ever been pinned by sleep paralysis, you've met their beast. You just have more footnotes and fewer charms. The parent nearest the hearth is already awake, of course. Parents sleep like foxes, one ear tuned to rein the other to fear. A hand reaches past you, fishes under the settle and finds holy water in a corked flask, a little parish river you can bring home in your pocket. A drop to the brow, a thumb cross sketched on the wool, a whispered phrase that has carried 1,000 nights Christ keep. The dog lifts his head and offers a low sympathetic, which is dog for, I will wrestle anything invisible and lose with honour. Light joke number 1, you consider appointing him night hag bouncer, but the position requires opposable thumbs. Breath together now, in slow like you're smelling bread, out long like you're blowing dust off a psalm. The child rides your rhythm the way a skiff rides a bigger boat's wake and the shiver steps down a rung or two. Meanwhile, the house performs its old liturgy of calm emberglass ticks like tiny metronomes. The cat sends one purr down the blanket like a ferry with a lantern. The rain on thatch recites iambic pentameter to anyone who needs it. You tell the child a small, shameless lie. The thing you felt is afraid of our blanket, because sometimes that's the exact grammar that works. Here's a quirky tidbit the night permits, while it tucks the child's fingers back into the warm. Some families kept a pebble with a natural hole, a hag stone hung near the bed, or threaded on a cord under a child's pillow. Look through the hole, they said, and you'll see the truth of a thing. Hang it, and the hag forgets your address. Others wore tiny iron keys on cords for the same reason iron is stubborn, and stubborn objects make poor ladders for bad dreams. On midsummer in certain places, sprigs of St. John's wort went under pillows to invite only the right sort of dreams, the kind that bring your future spouse for a polite cameo, instead of a demon for a rude sit. Does it work? The answer is what the child's softening shoulders are telling you. Belief is a blanket too. Now for the scholar's candle stub, historians still argue about how to read all this. Are we hearing universal physiology, sleep paralysis, night terrors, indigestion dressed in local clothes? Are we listening to sermons that magnified mischief into demons to keep parishioners tidy? Or are we glimpsing a genuine, widely shared sense that the night is a neighbourhood with other tenants, and that ritual is how you introduce yourself to it? Yes, says the archive helpfully. Medical texts, confessional manuals, miracle collections, and household charms do their four-way tug-of-war, while the bed itself just tucks in more bodies. Your small congregation is ecumenical, a little Latin, a little Rowan, a little iron, a little science called hand on back breathe with me. You pass the child a sip of water from the wooden mug. Cool, faithful tasting faintly of mint and barrel. The swallow seems to drop a pebble into a deep well. The ripples come back as longer breaths. You talk not over much. The night doesn't like speeches just enough to lace the mind to a different hook. Stories of silly mares who cannot hop over a broom of dogs, whose snore scares spectres back into the hedgerow of saints, who yawned so wide the devil fell in and came out nicer. Light joke number 2, you tell the child solemnly that the blanket is guild certified and cannot be sat upon without proper paperwork, which night hags famously misplace. Practical measures tiptoe in. You rotate the child a little away from the cold wall because draughts take liberties with fear. You slip a warmed stone toward their feet, a domestic star you can hold. You adjust the blanket's jurisdiction so no rogue toe peeks out and invites the weather to file a complaint. Against the bedhead, the tiny red thread you tied earlier seems almost to glow with the ember's approval, which is probably physics but feels like grammar. The church bell far off gives one shy note to say the hours rolled a little. You can never tell if it's the quarter or the half. The night keeps its own math. The sound slides into the room like a priest who knows how to tread on rafters. You whisper the simplest prayer again. No flourish, just a handle the mind can hold. And because you are also a modern host in a medieval bed, you murmur a line the child doesn't know is a sleep trick. Can you count my breaths? The child tries, makes it to 5, forgets why 5 mattered, and starts over, which is how the counting game wins. You count 2, and somewhere after a dozen the room counts for you. Mainstream historical note brushed with a candle feather people wrote about dreams. Not only nightmares, but dream books with lists see fish expect money, see geese expect gossip, see church expect weather. Clerics tutted, then sometimes kept their own private books. Physicians warned against heavy suppers, stale air beer that had opinions. Midwives lent herbs, friars lent blessed wax. The mare itself lived in law as well as law. Sworn testimonies mention it with the practical tone of people who have chores either way. The texture of night was thick with both meaning and maintenance. Your cottage is a footnote with a heartbeat, quirky aside before the yawn arrives wearing a crown. In later centuries people hid shoes in walls, bottles with pins and hair in hearths, and cat mummies under thresholds apotropaic caches to snag mischief in brick and oak. Some of those customs trace back to the very fears you've just tucked in beside. If someone ever renovates this cottage in a future your straw can't imagine, they'll find a little packet of the past folded behind a beam and argue about it in journals while you tonight simply pinch a blanket seam and go back to breathing like a bellows that likes its job. One more laugh. Light to set on the mantle, you promise the child that if any demon shows up again you will make it take a number and sit quietly by the hearth until morning, at which point the dog will conduct a thorough interview about its life choices. The child huffs a tiny laugh that smells like relief. The purr resumes. Rain edits itself down to commas. The cold along the wall withdraws to go bother the chickens in their dreams. Now the rhythm of the section softens to the long vowels of rest. Mainstream fact named. Quirky crumb placed. Scholarly tangle nodded at without waking it. Your hand keeps time on a small spine. The bed relearns its shape around 5 bodies and an optimist of a dog. You register the straw's quiet chorus again, less crackle, more hush, and feel the house's lungs match yours in the smell of wool and small heads, out the last thin thread of fright leaving by the door it used. For a moment you think you see something move in the emberglow, a shadow with knees and a peace treaty, but it's just the cat discovering a new right to occupy an immovable position across exactly the place your feet wish to be. Light joke number 3, you draft a bed charter of 1327 granting feet passage at dawn. The cat signs with a paw and no intention of compliance. The child sighs the long sigh that belongs to sleep. You let your hand rest and discover it's grown warm where it was, as if the blanket is paying you back. The night accepts the deposit and returns interest in minutes that feel like clear water. You're almost gone when a new little itch of reality arrives. Not fear this time, not breath gone wrong, but a much humbler, more democratic concern that visits every shared bed eventually, and has kept scholars arguing about hygiene for 100 tidy pages somewhere near your knee, under the saintly quilt of darkness. A small leg begins to scratch with a focus that suggests an old acquaintance. But the next duty was even stranger. The scratch begins as diplomacy one quick negotiation behind a knee and then becomes policy. You feel it travel a tiny pilgrim with urgent business, and the bed answers with a chain of sympathetic rustles. A calf shifts, a wrist detours. Someone's toes execute a covert reconnaissance sweep. Tonight's sensory anchor is small sound and sharp scent, the faint scritch of fingernails negotiating with skin, the clean nose-stinging tang of ash lye and vinegar that lingers on linen like a stern aunt. The wool's warm lanolin bass note beneath it all. You inhale and the room smells like a laundry day that went to Vesper's soap smoke and the honest barnyard of a life that doesn't apologise for being alive. You have met the night's oldest roommate's fleas lice, and the cousins nobody admits to at feast days. The little leg near your knee scratches with academic focus, the way an abbot might illuminate a capital A. You lay your palm over it, steady slow, and the child's calf settles under your hand as if your fingers could negotiate with insects. Light joke number 1. Welcome to medieval spa, where our signature treatment is mindful knot scratching, followed by a complimentary lecture on comb technology. Mainstream historical fact laid out like a enit on white linen. Medieval households fought pests all the time and on multiple fronts. Linen chemises shifts were the first line changed and laundered more often than outer garments, because skin and sweat meet there, and a clean, tightly woven layer slows the tiny invaders. Ash from the hearth turned into lye with hot water, bit grease and smell. Urine aged into lant boosted the clean like a harsh but effective cousin. Vinegar rinses snapped the sour. Sun and frost did the rest, bleaching and sweetening cloth, on hedges like flags of surrender fluttering in bright air. Knit combs, fine-toothed bone or boxwood lived on shelves, the way brushes live on yours, and delousing was a social activity. Evening light, a lap a comb, a head bowed not in shame but in routine, your fingers remembering that old choreography, find the hairline of the nearest small head, and trace a parting while the child sleeps. You don't comb now, but the gesture reminds everyone, including you, that solutions exist. Quirky tidbit wriggles out of history's collar. Some towns sold flea-trapping reliquaries of a sort, little mechanical devices, and perforated brooches in later centuries designed to lure and imprison the biters. But in the period we're drifting through, the practical tricks were simpler and older. Sprinkle straw with pennyroyal or southernwood. Tuck rosemary or rue near the bedhead. Scatter tansy and rushes. Hang a sachet sewn from a worn-out sleeve and stuffed with strong-smelling herbs where necks meet cloth. In cold months, people set bedding to freeze on clear mornings because even a flea respects winter's grammar. And there's the strangest charm of all laughter. Delousing time became story time, gossip time, song time hands, busy mouths full of village news, social grooming in the most literal evolutionary sense. You can almost hear last summer's comb sessions in this room. The dry chuckle, the sharp snap of a crushed souvenir flicked toward the fire with satisfaction. Now for your scholarly bone to gnaw, historians still argue about hygiene myths, the way dogs argue about who owns the sunny patch. One camp spends pages correcting the cliché that medieval people never bathed, pointing to bathhouses in towns, monastic rules listing wash days, hot stone steam huts, sweating rooms in the north, and physicians recommending wash at least of hands and face at specific hours. Another camp reminds us that bathing habits varied wildly by region, class, season, and plague panics. That bathhouses rose and fell with moral fashions and public health. That water could be as dangerous as it was cleansing, and that linen changed and laundered often did the daily work that modern showers do. Somewhere in the middle stands your bed, which knows that a clean shift at night can feel like forgiveness, and that scalp time under a comb can be kinder than an entire sermon about purity. The scratch campaign escalates. A small heel grinds into straw with the determination of a night-testing male. You intercept with a trick learned from grandmothers, rub the itch around the itch, a slow widening circle that convinces nerves the emergency is elsewhere. Then 2 quiet measures. First, you lift the blanket just enough to fan in a whisper of cool air, the itch's least favourite weather, and second, you pinch the fabric and tug it a hair's breadth, so no bristly fibre lies exactly where annoyance wants to live. The child who is half awake and therefore twice honest sighs a grateful mmm that could be bottled and sold as a tonic. The cottage offers equipment. On the shelf near the hearth sits a lidded wooden box with 3 dignified items: a bone neat comb, a little linen sachet that smells like someone taught a meadow to read, and a small glass vial with vinegar steeped with rosemary tips. You set the sachet near the child's shoulder the way you might set a watchman at a gate, and dampen your palms with 2 fingers' worth of scented vinegar. You smooth hair, lay it back smooth again. The scent cuts through wool and straw with a green clean line, and this may be mercy or myth or both. You actually feel the atmosphere around the scalp negotiate a ceasefire. Light joke number 2, medieval product reviews in your head suddenly bloom. 5 stars would comb again, smelled like a salad, slept like a saint. Mainstream detail stitched to the hem straw itself could be friend and foe. Fresh, dry, well-shaken straw insulates and springs. Old damp or crumbly straw invites more life than you invited. That's why families turned ticks inside out to sun them, beat them with switches to raise spring and lower populations, then replaced fillings when harvest and budgets approved. Inventories and scolding sermons both whisper a truth you can smell some kept up. Some sank under. Your bed earlier fluffed and fussed lies on the better side of the line tonight. It creaks like a basket, but not like a barn. A tiny debate pulls at your sleeve were lice and fleas seen as shameful or simply inevitable. Moralists sometimes use them as metaphors for sin, clinging, multiplying resistant to half measures. Some penitential texts even suggested tiny stings could count as useful mortification if borne well poverty's pearls. One poet quipped with the gallows humour of someone who had never tried to sleep through a harvest of pearls. But jokes in plays, household accounts for combs, and letters full of brisk complaints paint a more practical picture. People disliked them, fought them, and then got on with life. Your room follows that script, a moment of discomfort, a practiced response and a drowsy truce signed by candleless authorities. A sneeze small and moral announces that the herb sachet has opinions. The dog offended on behalf of all noses turns once and resettles with his chin on your shin, radiating support and heat. The cat, who has never itched a day in her official life if you ask her, opens one eye to judge the herb stack and then closes it to resume the important work of pretending fleas were invented for other species. The rain on thatch subtracts itself to occasional commas. Somewhere a bell risks a single note and thinks better of it. You take the chance to make this a lesson your skin can keep. You pat the blanket into a better drape heavy enough to dissuade tiny leaps, light enough to breathe. You slide a hand under the small leg and change the angle a finger's width, so the itch no longer has its favourite ledge. You murmur the oldest anti-itch charm, a story told in the slow, soft voice that turns nervous systems toward meadow. It's about a goose who borrowed shoes to outrun fleas, and discovered instead that geese do not need shoes, only friends and a pond, an allegory so tender and so shapeless it could only work in the dark. Quirky addendum from the washbench soot and goose fat mixed thin and smeared on cuffs and ankles turn up in some folk recipes as pest discouragers. And yes, the irony of inviting goose to solve fleas is not lost on your story's hero. Other receipts advise smoke from juniper or dried orange peels if ship and spice trade blessed your parish. In winter, when smoke is the house's permanent perfume, the extra sweep likely mattered less than the heat it rode in on. Light joke number 3 arrives wrapped in a yawn. You award yourself an imaginary guild badge, Master of Strategic Not Scratching 3rd Class, and your only dues are to keep breathing like a tide. The scratchy chorus fades to a solo, and then to memory. Breaths lengthen that slow, long bellows rhythm that means muscles have put their tools away. Your own eyes perform their little candle snuff one then the other, and darkness pads in with soft feet to occupy the space where the itch had been. The vinegar, a bright line a moment ago, softens to a herbal halo. The ashlie ghost tucks itself back into linen threads and seems suddenly less astringent, more protective. You are warm. The bed, bribed and reassured, regains its buoyancy. You drift. Before the section lets you go, a small tidy ledger of facts closes itself. You named the enemy mainstream. You recruited the allies quirky. You nodded to the librarian still arguing about bathhouses and laundry scholarly. And you practiced the only cure that never fails kind hands and enough time for the body to recall how to be quiet. The night recognises correct paperwork when it sees it. You are almost fully taken by the river, now that slow black current that carries straw islands and dog dreams alike. When the house breathes in a different key, the front latch makes a discreet throat. Clear the kind a door learns from watchmen. It is not fear. It is information outside the cottage the lane has grown its own sound boots, thoughtful on wet earth staff, tapping a code your skin already half remembers, and a voice about to speak the words that tell every sleeper which hour is passing by their window. But the next duty was even stranger. Seasons don't just live outside your door. They crawl into your bed and change the rules. Winter teaches you to sleep like a fort-thick wall's heavy allies, no sudden movements. Summer asks you to sleep like a reed, loose hollow, letting air thread your bones. Tonight's sensory anchor is air itself, changing clothes in winter. It wears wool and peat smoke round and blue in the nostrils. In summer it shows up thin and grassy, a little cocky with hay and gnats, the kind that slips past shutters shouting, "Everyone up with the stars." You practical creature that you are learned to swap the grammar of sleep as the year turns, because in a cottage, climate control is a committee meeting with straw as chair. Begin with winter. You know that one already draft maps body heater alignment, the blanket as constitution, the dog as minister of warmth. Your breath makes small ghosts and the thatch drums until the world forgets it used to be a field. Winter has deep nights with room for 2 sleeps, and an intermission of banking coals, tiny errands and tiny bravery. You feel how the bed holds you like a hand cupping a spark. The straw is spring, and insulation, the wool a portable wool. Somewhere outside, water rehearses being iced by singing to the bucket. You dream closer to the fire in winter because that's where light remembers your name. Now turn the dial, the room you're in becomes July without moving an inch. The dog relocates to the door tongue doing PR for heat management. The blanket sulks in a corner and pretends it was never important. Children sprawl in constellations rather than loaves, star-limbed and shameless. The straw rises against bare knees like a polite hedgehog. Your ears fill with summer's paperwork, crickets filing the same form forever, cattle blowing warm breath through fences, a late scythe, whispering in stubborn grass someone at the far end of the lane finishing a story they started in April. Your skin, which loved the weight of winter, insists now on distance. A sheet of linen becomes a treaty that air can sign. Mainstream historical fact laid cool as a damp cloth on the brow. Medieval sleep followed the agricultural calendar. In winter, long nights, short days, and indoor chores shaped 2-stage sleep and hearth-near bedding. In summer, short nights, Early rising and exhausted bodies often collapsed later after laughter in the yard after the last light died on the threshold. Many households thinned the bed in heat-less straw, or swapped top layers for a plain sheet if linen was plentiful. Shutters were propped with sticks to make wind eyes. Lofts became ovens, so children got the floor and the floor got gratitude. Harvest time pulled people into barns. There are enough accounts of children nodding off on haycocks and adults snatching field naps under carts that you can call it a pattern without blushing. Quirky tidbit fanned toward your face like a palm leaf in a chapel. Some families laid bracken fern as a top layer in summer, less prickly than tired straw aromatic and famous for snubbing insects who read too much. In marshy regions, new rushes sedge made a pale, cool mattress that smelled like the edge of ponds and stayed aired longer than barn straw. For windows, horn panes, thin, scraped translucent, stood in for glass where coin was shy. In deep heat, those came out and oiled. Parchment went up, or nothing at all, just shutters set to flirt with the wind and keep chickens from interviewing the bread. A damp cloth hung in a draught felt like cleverness itself. Also, and you should try not to judge, some households rolled a cool stone across wrists and temples, the same stone that warmed feet in January does double duty in July, a medieval intern with year-round enthusiasm. Listen to summer sounds. Bells still beat the night, but thinner metal cooling faster in dry air, the tower's echo carrying clean. The floor smells of dust that pretends to be flour. Straw creaks drier, louder, and gives splinters small and philosophical. A moth sues the candle for brightness and settles out of court. Mouths do not cuddle in summer the way they do in winter. They sketch, find their own paragraph, agree to meet in dreams where air has better manners. Light joke number 1, congratulations, you've unlocked advanced medieval AC air through cracks. Settings, breezier and cow smell, but worth it. Mainstream detail about kit-swapping bedding rotated with the year. Thick mantles and fulled blankets slept cool months. In heat, a single sheet linen if fortune smiled nettle cloth in some clever parishes lay between you and whatever the bed felt like being. Curtains around beds where households owned them were drawn tight in winter to make private weather, and drawn back in summer to trade privacy for air. Nightcaps, so comic in pictures, served 2 lives. Winter's wool watchmen, and summer's sweatband keeping hair from sticking and dreams from overheating. Straw ticks were thinned, fluffed, or traded layer for layer with fresher fill. Harvest's first cool nights smelled like clean straw and relief. Now the scholar pokes their head in armed with a bar graph and a friendly frown. Debate how many peasant households had any kind of window glazing glass-horn parchment versus shutters alone. Some argue that horn panes remained rare and valuable, more likely in towns or prosperous farms. Others point to archaeological bits and parish accounts showing wider use than snobs suppose. Another debate larger than the cottage did: people actually sleep outdoors on hot nights' porches, yards, loft doors more commonly than texts admit. Complaints about dew thieves and propriety suggest it happened enough to make clerics purse lips. Journals and letters are city-heavy. Countryside habits hide under hedges. Historians still argue whether the soft sprawl of summer nights made rules more flexible or merely made rule keepers sweatier. Quirky summer fix that actually works. Soak the rushes at the threshold and sweep water into the dust evaporation. Buys you 10 blessed minutes of cool as air parades through proud of its new trick. Hang a damp sheet near the open shutter. It turns wind into a novice physician. If herbs were good to you this year, stuff a thin pillow with meadowsweet and mint. The scent tells the head a story about rivers. And yes, there's the hard truth. Fleas campaign harder in heat. Out come the nitcombs and the vinegar, but also the sun, astonishing disinfectant that it is, because linen bleached on hedges is a boasting friend. Now walk backward into spring and autumn seasons that practice being each other. In spring the bed smells briefly of lamb and wet clay and new rushes. Children kick blankets off and then weep for them at 2 a.m, when the air changes its mind. In autumn, everything is tired. The straw of the bed and the straw of the field share a yawn. Blankets reappear with a theatrical, "Did you miss me?" Dogs suggest earlier bedtimes with great moral gravity. The first frost is the year's most polite thief. It steals the edge from smells and leaves everything smelling like an empty church. Cold, clean, echoing. Mainstream fact braided through the calendar labour pattern set sleep like bells did. Harvest weeks meant late suppers, dead to the world collapses and intermissions so short they felt like shy handshakes. Sundays and feast eves made longer wakeful watchers talk songs, combs, small mending. Long winter nights invited stories to be braided into prayer. Summer shrank everything to essentials. Even the pest rhythms obeyed. Flies tyrannized summer afternoons. Mice took over harvest barns, and winter's quiet magnified the one flea that swore an oath to remain. Like joke number 2, your smart bed is now a pile of straw. Listening to crickets decide whether they're composing or plagiarizing, and frankly, it's the most sophisticated ambient track you'll ever own. Debate number 2, because scholars like second segmented sleep itself more winter than summer. Many argue yes. The longer, darker months wrote 2-part nights in bolder ink, while summer's brief darkness squeezed the watch into a mere whisper, or erased it unless nursing age or worry held you up. Others counter with evidence that some people carried the habit year-round, that the watch was as much cultural as seasonal a taut rhythm, that persisted even when the sun attempted a hostile takeover. Your body helpful uncomplicated votes with the sky. In long nights it comes up for air. In short nights it dives and stays gone. Summer's straw has its own personality, and you feel it under your shoulder blade, now lighter, loftier, a little less obedient. You do the summer stomp the wiggle test, but with fewer witnesses, and it settles into channels that breathe. A sheet slides easier over summer straw. Friction is a winter sport. If you're lucky or poor, which covers many kinds of luck, the sheet is patched thin and wonderful. Old linen forgets to be scratchy and remembers to be cloud. The smallest child sleeps perpendicular to everyone else, a human breeze. The dog dreams of eels, which is unrelated but seasonally appropriate. Quirky diagram from the church porch someone has posted the saints' days like weather reports. Candlemas February whispers add a log. Don't trust the mildness. Lammas August shouts nap under a cart you fool. The sun is going to eat you. Michaelmas September advises bring the heavier blanket down from its high shelf and shake out the spiders kindly because they've written their wills into the corners. These feasts are also sleep markers, the year's duvet being pulled up or kicked off in public. Like joke number 3, dewy with yawn, call your seasonal routine medieval sleep optimization TM. Winter stack, summer slack, spring shrug, autumn sigh. Price 1 lifetime of chores and a good dog. You end the section in air again because that's what changed and what you learned to read. In winter you breathe warmth and the room answers with low notes wool, smoke, dog. In summer you breathe distance and the room answers with high ones, crickets, straw far off voices. The bed is not a constant. It's an instrument you retune by month. Your fingers, which once tucked everything harder, now lift shake and smooth in ways that let night pass through you, instead of stacking on you. Sleep like bread is seasonal. You're close to gone. Somewhere beyond the hedge, an owl decides summer is over for tonight and moves its hunting to a lower key. Somewhere dew begins its quiet occupation of everything left, outside by optimists. Inside your sheet has found the exact temperature where skin says yes without thinking. Eyes make their weird tender bargain with dark. Ears choose which sounds they'll take with them. You're sailing the short summer river toward the slippery little island called Dawn, and just as your boat glides into that last black current, where even crickets whisper the village remembers another clock besides bells and seasons, somewhere slow and deliberate a staff-tapped stone, a voice clears its throat to speak into door cracks and eaves, and a word you know is coming old as roofs, practical as bread, leans at the latch and calls the hour to anyone still awake to hear it. But the next duty was even stranger. You learn a village by how it sleeps. Doors look similar by day oak and iron, and the same polite cough at the latch, but night exposes floor plans like a map. Some beds breathe low and broad by the hearth. Some stack themselves into the rafters like a whispering choir. Tonight's sensory anchor is ladder and loft, the polished wood under your palms, the dry rope that remembers every hand, the dust-mote constellations drifting up where warm air hoards itself like gossip. When you climb, the ladder talks back, soft little kick sounds at the pegs, a hemp creak, a splinter that minds its manners, and the air changes coat warmer, sweeter with smoke's upper voice, tinged with the rafters' oaky breath. Lofts are the village's balcony seats. In one cottage you crawl under a beam and emerge onto a low platform the width of 2 geese and a decision. Straw here is thin to keep you from drowning in heat, and faces point toward the smoke hole like pilgrims toward a saint. The dog declines the climb, professional reasons, and posts at the ladder's foot an earthbound guardian. The children in the loft practice a different geography of closeness bodies align, like books on a narrow shelf, shoulder blade to shoulder blade, so nobody rolls into the rafters and learns physics the unfun way. Light joke number 1, bedtime rule: if you drop a sock, it belongs legally to the person who can be bothered to go get it, which is no one, so congratulations, the sock is now heritage. Mainstream historical fact laid across the joists like a sensible plank. Many medieval houses, especially in England, the Low Countries and parts of Scandinavia, developed sleeping lofts or solas upper spaces above the hall, or outshot reached by ladder or steep stair. In humbler cottages, the loft was little more than a platform over part of the single room. In wealthier dwellings, the sola might be a separate heated chamber, with a bedstead, a chest, and the luxury of a door that shuts like a sentence. At the other end of Europe, longhouses and byre dwellings kept people and animals under one great roof. Humans sleeping raised a step or two above the cattle end to borrow heat and avoid hooves in the dark. Bed meant everything from a beautifully carved frame curtained like a tent of manners to a tick on planks to a straw sack on earth that had been persuaded to be a floor. Slide back down the ladder and visit a house with no loft at all, just the open hall with a roof like a ship's belly turned upside down. Sleep lives near the fire here, organised by radius infants, and the elderly in the warm circle. Larger children and hardy guests in the second ring, feet toward heat, heads toward wall the way a school of fish chooses alignment because water chooses them. Earth floor under you. Yes, but not naked. Packed clay with ash and sand sifted into it, sometimes smoothed with a slurry so it sheds crumbs, sometimes a layer of rushes spread and swapped, when company or conscience demands, never as often as the priest recommends, always more often than the most cynical poet says. Straw beds remain the same species in every plan, but their habitat varies on planks and alcoves against benches under stairs, or living shamelessly as honest floor. Quirky tidbit delicately placed so it doesn't scratch in parts of the far north and highlands. Box beds or bed closets, sleeping nooks enclosed with boards and shutters, became beloved in later medieval and early modern rooms, holding warmth like a secret, and keeping draughts politely outside. In alpine valleys and along the North Sea, cupboard beds snuggled into walls, lids or doors turned sleepers into parcels. Whether you call them medieval or early modern depends on parish and plank. What you feel in them is immediate, the way sound becomes a private soup, the way breath writes quickly on the wood, the way a curtain can act like a small well-behaved climate. You duck into one, and the world reduces to 3 boards, 2 blankets, 1 candle, 0 wind. 0. Now for the scholarly not mind your feet on the rungs, historians still argue just how widespread lofts were in the lower social tiers before the later 14th and 15th centuries, and how much of what we picture comes from houses that survived precisely because they were sturdier than average. Dendrochronology dates beams. Probate inventories list a bed in the solar. Illuminations draw beds like princely altars, even when the caption says peasants. All of it needs sorting. Another debate braids in animals under the same roof is that a winter-only strategy, a northern custom, a poverty badge, or simply the most practical central heating plan in a world that knew the price of timber. The answer is regional and seasonal, which is a historian's way of saying bring a map and a calendar. Your body, in contrast, brings a blanket and a dog. Walk the lane in your head and peek through door cracks the way wind does. House a cruck-framed 2-bay's central hearth. Children lofted over the service bay. Ladder polished by decades of small feet. House B 1-room stone cottage with smoke-blackened rafters and a battered settle that doubles as a bed by night. Everyone horizontal by the fire, dream breath rising to warm the spiders. House C, a merchant's townhouse. Front shop closed, back hall awake. Upstairs chamber with a bedstead, a chest whose top promises do not sit, and curtains that make a weatherproof sentence around sleep. House D, a byre house on a cold edge of the map. Cattle's breath walks the rafters. Humans bank their coals in a corner and smell summer hay in January because the roof remembers. Same village, maybe not. Same century often. Same duty, always make the night kind. Listen to how plans rewrite sleep. In loft houses, night is a vertical story, parents below children above or the reverse, depending on whose knees require less ladder. The watch at midnight means quiet feet, on pegs, a private ember seen from a height like a small town in a red valley. In open hall cottages, night is a radial story, intimacies arranged by distance from flame. Midnight means the whole household turns like a slow constellation, and the watch is the ember itself with no climb. In boxed beds, night is a capsule, 2 breaths, 1 world. The watch is a thumb rubbing a knot in the wood with the kind of attention that turns into prayer without effort. Mainstream fact wrapped in plank-smell furniture followed these differences. Bedsteads and truckle beds appear where floors are friendly to wheels and legs. Rope-laced frames sleep tight comes later as a joke, but the ropes do need tightening hold ticks off cold drafts and let you retie your comfort. Where coin is scarce, a mattress on a chest lid or a board on trestles lifts you just enough to tell damp to mind its distance. In lofts every inch matters. Pegs on posts keep caps drying and combs ready. The candle has a hook and not a stand, so wax drips into a scrap dish instead of into straw, because even saints like a backup plan. Quirky village signature ceilings talk about your water. In marshy places, rafters wear the green lace of mildness. And bedtime includes a treatment of coughs and a lecture about keeping embers shy. On high chalk dust falls like pale flour. You wake with a saintly smear on your nose and know the well will taste like flint and secrets today. In woodland parishes, beams smell like tannin and bees. Night there is a barrel you sleep inside, staved and sweet. In coastal towns, everything insists on salt. Beds creak in a higher key and drafts arrive with gossip from ships. Like joke number 2, your real estate agent would describe all of them as cozy, characterful, open plan with mezzanine potential. Some cow adjacency, excellent ventilation via religiously significant smoke hole. The ladder invites you up again for a different loft, a richer one now with a window no bigger than a hymn but glazed with horn translucent and kind. Moonlight softens itself through that veil and lays a cool hand on a linen sheet. The bed here has curtains, and the curtain's edge has a row of little red stitches, someone's private rosary. You sit on the frame and feel the difference a frame makes air can travel under you. Mice must apply for citizenship. Feather tick above straw maybe. The smell here shifts toward laundry and lavender. You can't even hear the cow. The children sleep in a truckle that slides away by day like a secret. This is the same century as your straw island, only tilted, same needs, different answers, same county of sleep. Scholars tug your sleeve again. Those bed curtains weren't only about privacy, they were weather-bed tents that gathered breath, kept drafts civil, and let a single ember do more. Archaeology catches them in rings and hooks. Wills list the best bed with a tester as heirlooms worth naming. Yet prescriptive texts also thunder about honest separation, so we mustn't mistake curtain for chastity any more than we mistake straw for sin. As always, regional, seasonal, practical. You end where most nights actually do, back at ground level on the humble bed that runs the parish. You slide off the ladder and the rope leaves a faint scrape on your palm, a souvenir that smells of hemp and smoke good things. The floor under your knee is cool and faintly gritty. The hearth throws one last ruby at the dark. The dog who respects architecture only insofar as it allows proximity to you reassigns your feet to himself with a proprietary sigh. You're suddenly glad for the village's variety because it means that even when roofs look alike, people solved cold and closeness 100 different ways and left you a library of workable answers. Like joke number 3, you promise yourself that tomorrow you'll invent the universal bed warmer than a box bed breezier, then a loft cheaper than a chest with legs approved by dogs and priests. And then you remember the universal bed already exists. It's called Whoever Will Share Their Blanket. The house resettles, open hall loft. Box bed buyer all inside your head at once as if the village has moved into your chest for a night. Your breath collects those plans the way straw collects summer, practical, warm, a little itchy with knowledge. In your own corner, the straw you fluffed earlier remembers your weight with affection. The blanket has forgiven your tour and volunteers to hold you like a sensible argument that's won. You put your palm on the ladder rung one last time and feel that small rope scratch again, the kind of mark that says you went up and came down and didn't drop the mug. You close your eyes. The loft sits above you like a sleeping second self. The open hall lies beside you like a friendly field. The box bed breathes inside the wall and promises to keep secrets you haven't told it yet. The village is asleep in every style it knows under every solution it could afford, and the night pleased with its portfolio begins to file things away. You're almost gone when a noise not born of beam or blanket steps across the threshold of hearing, measured human outside staff on stone voice choosing a key, and you realise the hour caller has come to walk the lane and tell you what time it is in words shaped to pass through shutters and into dreams. But the next duty was even stranger. Guests do not enter a cottage. They enter the bed. That's the unvarnished truth of a road that manufactures weariness faster than coin. You hear them before you see them, the door's polite cough at the latch, then the smell of outside stepping in, and hanging its damp cloak on the room, wet wool, horse smoke that's been rained on ale turned philosophical by miles. Tonight's sensory anchor is road dust and wet cloak, the mineral tickle of grit on tongues, the sweet sour bloom of damp fabric steaming back to life by the hearth, the leather buckle note that says a saddle had opinions all day. The newcomers shuffle the dog auditions, hospitality and security in a single sniff, and the negotiation begins not about stories, those come free, but about space. Make room, someone whispers, which is medieval, for perform a miracle with geometry. The straw answers with a papery laugh. Feet to the fire, heads to the wall, elbows to a treaty. You lift the blanket like a curtain, and the road-warm bodies fold in producing the tiny theatre sounds of new sleep arrangements, the shaykh of a knee discovering a stranger's shin, the delicate sorry in two languages that both mean we're in this together. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you're now co-authoring a group nap with people whose names you learned after you agreed to share a pillow. Mainstream historical fact set down like a pack by the door. Travel meant bed sharing at inns, in alehouses, at monasteries with kin, and often with strangers. Hospitality laws and customs stitched Europe thickly. Monastic guest halls took in pilgrims, confraternities, kept hostels. Manor households absorbed visiting kin like rain barrels take weather. Public inns proliferated in market towns by the later Middle Ages. Private room rare. A room might hold 2 beds, each bed as democratic as a pew, whoever pays or prays lies down. Travellers brought bedrolls when they could, and trust when they couldn't. The phrase bedfellow wasn't coy. It was logistics wearing a shrug. You slide right to make space for a road wife with hay in her hair and a laugh like a cart turning. She settles a child on the straw quick practiced, then tucks a little purse under the tick with a movement so smooth it barely exists. Nobody looks. Everyone knows. The man with her brother husband companion until dawn finds the blanket's edge and adds his weight to the night, the way a stone joins a wall incrementally convincingly. Your own body adjusts its borders, turned shoulder-borrowed heat. A new rhythm found the way streams find confluence. Now the quirky tidbit rides in with the mud at some inns. A bed's rent was priced for its capacity, not its virtue. A feather bed might cost dear, but guarantee fewer splinters. A straw tick cheaper, and loud with history. Travellers sometimes slept in their shifts for decency and for pest management. Some kept knives close tucked harmlessly under a folded cap, a signal that said trust but also bedtime. Inns stored communal sheets if they had the staff and soap. Many did not. So people slept on their cloaks or their conscience and learned to tell the difference between a bed that smelled like honest sleep and one that smelled like last night's theology. The bed inches evolves. A spare plank truckle slid from under a bench accepts 2 narrow spines like a salter margin accepts glosses. The dog pragmatic socialist chooses the greatest concentration of feet as his pillow. You watch a quiet economy unfold, the youngest children drift toward the warmest wedge. The tall fold like knives. The guest whose cough sounds oldest is granted leeward. The woman with the baby wins a draft-free corner without asking. No one says fair. Everyone practices it. Here's your scholars not to worry with sleepy fingers. Historians still argue how often peasants chose to host versus had to host, and how much of hospitality was legal duty versus custom. Some statutes demanded lodging for officials and soldiers notoriously resented, while customary hospitality to travellers, pilgrims' messengers' kin, was praised in sermons and punished only in its absence. Did most rural houses regularly host strangers? In busy corridors, yes. Elsewhere, hospitality clustered at alehouses, manor gates, and religious houses. Sources lean urban because scribes do. Archaeology gives you benches and hearths. Charters give you obligations. Songs give you the warmth that made obligation bearable. The bed as always gives you the truth we fit or we freeze. Talk begins in loaf-sized pieces. The roadwife tells of a bridge upstream with planks missing like teeth. A carter swears the miller is cheating the brook. Someone repeats a rumour about wolves as if the wolves paid for advertising. You add your own local bulletins, the baker's oven sulked and then repented. The priest's bee swarm colonised his hat. The last storm moved the lane 6 inches to the left. The newcomers relax. The familiar syllables of village life, the grammar of small weather, small bread, small luck reintroduce their bodies to rest. Mainstream fact seasoned with ale, alehouses doubled as hostels. You could rent bench and blanket, hear 6 dialects by noon, learn a new curse for a stubborn axle, and sleep shoulder to stranger on straw that had already learned more secrets than any confessor. Monasteries ran guest halls that smelled like broth and beeswax. Hospices on pilgrim roads offered cots and the mercy of a roof. Guild guest rooms welcomed members. Townhouses hosted cousins for fairs until cousins blurred into colleagues. None of this was scandal. It was infrastructure with elbows. Quirky side note with crumbs, the Wayfarer's kit often included a spoon yours, a knife yours, a wooden bowl that doubled as hat for napping bread, and sometimes a towel that served as napkin sling, pillowcase and status if you kept it clean. A sprig of strong herb mint costumery rode in a pocket to sweeten breath and make rough ale friendlier. Letters of passage carried seals like small moons. Pilgrim badges pinned to hats broadcast where your prayers had collected. In the bed, those badges are cool discs that press your temple and dream you toward a saint. You rotate the blanket an inch a maneuver so precise you could qualify for a guild. The new man, freckled with a tired grin, mutters, "Thanks," without turning his head. He smells like horse leather, and rain, a combination the dog respects and the cat ignores. He finds space for his knees in the diplomatic zone between your calves and a stranger's shin. In 5 breaths he's part of the room's instrument, contributing a baritone snore that makes the rafters feel employed. Now the debate with candles at both ends, inns versus monasteries. Where did most ordinary travellers sleep? It hinges on century route and purse. Early on, ecclesiastical hospitality dominated long roads. By the 14th and 15th centuries, commercial inns thickened along trade arteries, some with signs carved or painted. The Swan, the George the Crown, stabilised by town ordinances and guild oversight. Which was safer, which was cleaner, which kept better order at midnight, records argue and repeat themselves. Your bed answers with statistics of warmth. Tonight's safety is a crowd that likes you. Cleanliness is a blanket that lies flat. Order is the rhythm of breathing that makes the roof believe you. Like joke number 2, if YouTube had existed, someone would have made 1 million views on top 10 medieval sleeping arrangements ranked you won't believe them before the cart under the stars. The roadwife's child wakes, makes a small searching noise, then finds your forearm and decides it's a hill worth sleeping on. You accept annexation. The mother whispers a thanks you pretend not to hear. That's how tolls are paid at night. Quiet debts settled in borrowed muscle and blanket inches. You realise not for the first time that guest right is less a law than a choreography. If we turn the same way at the same time, nobody falls out of the music. Mainstream note on etiquette: boots off if they can be. Knives sheathed. Caps where mice can't audition for hats. Strangers divided by children when possible, because children are the universal buffer. Last arrivals take last heat by the fire. First to rise banks, the coal sets the pot and blesses the rest with porridge or at least hot water. Morning gossip will audit compliance. The dog is the enforcement arm. Another quirky thread: some travellers carried a small bed rope to lash cloaks into a makeshift bolster, or to tie their roll to a peg, less theft prevention than tidy soul practice. Others rubbed a fingertip of garlic on the bedhead for luck, an insurance policy the bed tolerated with a grimace. In regions with bed closets, a traveller might get a curtains half a little nation of wool shared by treaty. Someone begins a story, it's always a story that carries the watch over the narrow bridge between wakes. Tonight's tale is not about kings or dragons. It's about a lost shoe found by a goose who wore it better than the original owner and demanded a dance. Laughter moves through the bed like a ripple, bumping snores without breaking them. You laugh too, the kind of soft laugh that leaves the body looser than it found it. Historians still argue one more knot before your eyes go. Candle was bed sharing with strangers more intimate than we imagine. Or less. Did it create bedfellow bonds that lasted into daylight? Or was it simply a neutral technology of warmth? Court depositions sometimes elevate bedfellows to witnesses with privileged ears. Letters occasionally use the word like a credential of trust. But there's also the obvious fatigue as a solvent. Warmth, an argument ender. Most nights bedfellow means we didn't freeze. Your bed signs that definition with 20 toes. Like joke number 3, if mattresses had review sheets in the 14th century, this one would earn 8/10 would sleep again. Lost 1 sock to dog, gained 3 new cousins. The room settles. Road and cottage become the same country. The guests stretch into the shape of locals. The locals learn a traveller's stillness, the kind hammered into bones by miles. Smells mellow from wet cloak to person. Damp wool turns from river to sheep again. The straw finds its channels, persuading new hips to obey old grooves. Above the hearth, the ember uses its last red to outline a pot, a ladle, a set of bowls, the morning's paragraph waiting to be written by someone who knows where the spoon sleeps. You're down to the small sense-making breath, now the exhale that says this bed is one creature with many names. You're almost gone, and the bed is almost the sea when a familiar pressure returns the soft but relentless gravity of kin. A sibling elbow, yours, sometimes theirs, always legendary, arrives with the smugness only family can produce and wedges into the treaty zone with ancestral rites, and a grin you can hear in the dark. But the next duty was even stranger. The elbow is a comet, and you are its unlucky astronomy. It arrives out of nowhere, glowing with kinship and blunt purpose, and suddenly the entire night is about shoulders and boundaries. You shift, they shift the blanket, adjudicates like Solomon, but with less wisdom, and the straw becomes an accessory to the crime by creaking louder than necessary. Tonight's sensory anchor is contact the press of sibling bone, the thud of straw, announcing even the smallest move, the warmth of two bodies that have shared years of sleep and quarrel, the unmistakable salt-skin smell of someone who ate too much onion at supper and is proud of it. Sibling sleep is its own country. Rules here are written in elbows, knees, and sighs. The first rule: you always claim more space than you need, because justice is not real until someone argues about it. The second hair is a weapon, especially if your sister has braids with the tensile strength of ship rope. The third forgiveness comes fast, because tomorrow you must carry buckets side by side. Light joke number 1, medieval children invented Wi-Fi, except here it stands for Why is foot in my side. Mainstream historical fact set down like a ledger in straw shed sleeping wasn't a novelty, it was default. Siblings piled into beds by age, size, or survival logic. Infants sometimes swaddled and placed separately in cradles for safety. But once past that fragile stage, children joined the collective pile. Diaries and household accounts from later centuries still recall bedfellow squabbles as part of childhood. Medical treatises even noted that warmth shared among siblings keeps humours in better balance, though they also occasionally scolded about immodesty. Proof that moralists never had to wedge 6 children under one blanket. The elbow withdraws but leaves a memo: I was here. You sigh, push straw into a defensive berm and consider escape routes. The loft ladder is full, the hearth circle already busy. The only true option is to declare peace and turn the battlefield into a treaty. You tuck your hand between your own knees, classic tactic, shift your spine to the wall, and pretend the elbow was an accident. Everyone knows it wasn't. The elbow's owner grins into the dark, which is how you know you are family. Quirky tidbit whispered from a manuscript margin: medieval doodlers loved to sketch children brawling, tugging hair, or shoving on benches. That energy didn't stop at bedtime. Folk sayings compared sibling quarrels to cockerels in a sack. Yet alongside this, countless lullabies included verses about children lying head by head, dreaming under one wool, and turning like geese in a nest. To fight and to sleep together were not contradictions, they were the entire syllabus of kinship. You roll again, trying the old tactic of stealing blanket in the name of warmth. Your sibling counters instantly, tugging back with battlefield precision. The tugging escalates until both of you risk exposure to the cold. At the last second, the dog in his wisdom throws himself across the disputed zone like a furry arbitrator. Peace enforced. Light joke number 2, congratulations, your dog is now the United Nations of blanket. Breathing synchronizes, slowly grudges, dissolving into the larger harmony of the bed. The ember's red eye notes the truce and dims approvingly. You trace a line on the blanket's seam, your side, their side, and immediately a toe crosses it, just to prove lines are ridiculous. You almost laugh, but laughter would mean acknowledging defeat. Instead you yawn, which is safer. Here's the scholarly knot: historians still argue about how much intimacy between siblings was tolerated or worried over. Prescriptive literature warned against inordinate familiarity when opposite sexes shared beds beyond infancy, especially once children neared adolescence. Yet the reality of space scarcity meant siblings often did so anyway. Parish courts record complaints, but also reveal the ubiquity of the arrangement. Did moral concern reflect widespread anxiety, or just clerical ideals? The answer is blurred, as answers often are between parchment and straw. Morning memories always soften these battles. Adults recall with fondness the warmth of being piled in with brothers and sisters, the shared stories told in the dark, the secret languages invented between snores. Arguments over space became legends retold for decades. And sometimes the same bed meant whispered comfort when thunder cracked or wolves howled beyond the yard. It wasn't only quarrel, it was also survival dressed as company. You give up the fight not because you've lost, but because sleep has better arguments. The elbow is still there, lodged like punctuation in a long sentence, but now it's part of the grammar of the night. You breathe, your sibling breathes. The dog sighs in triumph. Peace has been declared, and in its wake comes drowsiness so heavy it can't be ignored. Like joke number 3, you realise the medieval bed was less about REM cycles and more about random elbow movement. Scientists would agree. Your eyelids slip. The straw croons in tiny paper voices, the rafters creak like monks shifting in their stalls. The sibling beside you dreams of winning, and the dog dreams of justice served warm. You almost make it across the bridge to full sleep, when a deeper sound, lower than quarrels, wider than rooms, drifts in from beyond the cottage. The toll of a bell, not the parish chime, but heavier, slower, the kind used to mark danger or dawn. But the next duty was even stranger. The bell is not parish tidy. It doesn't peal like Complin's neat necklace of notes or Matin's thin braid. It rolls heavy and deliberate like a cartwheel striking every stone of the lane. It's a watch bell, the voice of the village, deciding to stay awake while you pretend not to. Tonight's sensory anchor is sound as horizon, the throb of iron across wet fields, the way it rattles the glassy core of your chest, the faint echo it stirs from rafters that thought their shift was over. You lie there, half pinned by sibling elbow, half lifted by the bell's authority, and the bed becomes both safe harbour and listening post. In villages with no wall, the watch is made of lungs and feet. A man with a staff taps stone at intervals, calling the hour, so even sleepers know time is marching without them. Past midnight, all's well. The phrase travels through shutters, through straw, through ears that aren't truly closed. You hear the cadence now, a staff's measured knock, the voice that joins it like an actor, with one line in the play but immense responsibility. Dogs answer in chorus, each yard producing its own verse until the village sounds like a hymn sung by animals who never rehearsed. Mainstream historical fact nailed as firmly as any church ordinance, communal watches were law in many towns and custom in many villages. Men took turns as night watch, carrying lantern horn or staff. Their job patrol lanes deter thieves, smell fire before it ate a street chase off drunkards whose songs annoyed saints. Bells marked their hours. In cities, curfews rang a literal instruction to cover fires, shut tavern shutters, close gates. In rural hamlets, the bell was less command, more reassurance. Yes, there is someone with eyes open, and no, the night hasn't decided to change its script yet. A quirky tidbit sneaks between the strokes in London bells named the watch, resounded across wards, while in tiny villages a horn served the same role, sometimes so shrill, it spooked owls off rafters. In Scandinavian towns, the watchmen sang verses instead of simply calling psalms rhymes, even jokes, so the community received poetry with its policing. 2 o'clock, all is well. God guard the town from fire and hell. You imagine your own watchman outside, a man with wet boots and a lantern guttering in wind, improvising verses about sheep that won't sleep, or hens that forgot the curfew. The dog in your bed lifts his head ears, triangulating the staff taps. He rumbles, then lies back down, reassured by the rhythm. The cat ignores all civic duty, curling tighter into herself. Your sibling mutters something incoherent and throws a knee across you, a subconscious attempt to measure if bells mean danger. You whisper all's well, and the knee retreats satisfied. Like joke number 1, you consider founding a new bedtime genre called ASMR Medieval Watchmen. 10 hours of staff knocks and muttered rhymes to keep insomniacs from thinking too hard about wolves. The bell fades, but the silence it leaves is thicker than before, like bread pulled from the oven that still hums heat. Your ear keeps reaching after it, hungry for reassurance, and finds smaller noises to replace it. A distant horse shaking its tack, the squeal of a pig disagreeing with sleeper shutter slapped by wind and then soothed. Night is never nothing. It is a parliament of minor sounds waiting for the bell's adjournment. Here's the scholarly knot: historians debate the effectiveness of the medieval night watch. Court rolls show plenty of theft, violence and fires despite bells and staffs. Some scholars argue watches were symbolic ritual performances of safety rather than effective patrols. Others insist they worked well enough to justify their expense, pointing to fines levied on households who failed to send men for duty, and to ordinances that multiplied through centuries. Did the bell truly deter thieves or just comfort the honest? Probably both. But what your bed knows tonight is simple. When a human voice threads through the dark saying all's well, bodies unclench even if thieves are laughing in the next hedge. Quirky cultural side note, some watchmen carried a clapper instead of a staff, striking it to warn they approached because being mistaken for a thief was a poor start to employment. In a few towns, they carried horns carved with names, blowing them at the hour, so their personal breath became part of civic identity. Some verses survive in scribbled collections, comic jingles, half liturgical, half local like bedtime podcasts in the age of straw. You imagine your watchman rhyming. 3 o'clock, the mill pond still goose is quiet, pig is shrill while stamping feet against frost. The ember in your hearth stirs brightening as a draught finds it, as if listening too. Your own breath lengthens again, a reflex to the reassurance. Your body rehearses sleep as ritual. Inhale the bell's echo. Exhale the straw's acceptance. Like joke number 2, your modern phone alarm is less charming than a man with a lantern singing bad rhymes. You wonder if you could market Village Bell as a ringtone and watch millions fall asleep faster. Mainstream fact tucked into the blanket seam, curfew bells did not mean stay indoors forever. They meant bank. The fires shut the gates, put candles away and reduce the chance that one drunkard, plus one spark, equals a neighbourhood tragedy. Fires were medieval monsters faster than horses, more democratic than plague. The bell was water carried by sound. In rural hamlets without walls, bells carried different duties: call to prayer, call to work, and at night the softer call, remember you live in company. Quirky folklore detail: in some places, bells themselves were believed to repel storms and demons. They were baptized with names, given sponsors, treated as parish citizens. When they rang at night, they didn't just mark time, they patrolled metaphysical borders, scaring away the things that crouched on thresholds. Scholars scoff, but you lying here know the effect. You hear the bell, and the dream monsters retreat muttering about noise complaints. Your sibling stirs and mumbles. Is it morning, you whisper? Not yet. Morning is another country. This is still the Republic of Straw. You both drift again, trusting that if anything changed, if fire bloomed, if thieves prowled, the bell would change its language and you would rise. For now its last word is peace. Like joke number 3, you imagine the watchman himself, yawning staff, slipping lantern, tilting, muttering all's well except me. The soundscape returns to its minor instruments. Dog snore, cat sigh, ember pop. The bell's absence is almost as loud as its presence, but your chest is calmer. The night holds. Your eyes close again, pulling a blanket over sound itself. And just as you're gone, almost entirely gone, the dog stiffens ears forward, tail rigid, and growls low, the kind of growl that doesn't belong to parish bells or neighbour pigs. It belongs to something moving at the edge of the yard, a sound the watchman did not announce a presence that makes the straw beneath you tense like a drum skin. But the next duty was even stranger. The growl is not performance. Dogs have 3 kinds. The playful one, all rumble, no roots. The bored one, half snore, half announcement. And the serious one, the one you're hearing now, low, steady, like a rope pulled taut under the bed. The dog has scented otherness. Tonight's sensory anchor is alertness, the stiff air, before something changes the scratch of claws on straw, as the dog repositions the prickle on your own scalp, that insists ears can see. The siblings around you stir, one elbow retracting one knee, searching for reassurance. The mother shushes in her sleep, but her body has already turned toward the sound. Outside the yard answers with silence. No owl, no cart, no creak of trees. Silence that feels chosen. Then the staff tap. 1, 2, deliberate against stone. The watchman's voice closer now, drifting through shutters. Past 3, all's well, God guard the town from fire and hell. His words scatter across the lane like crumbs for birds. The dog's tail gives one uneasy thump, respect for the watchman, mistrust for something he hasn't noticed. Mainstream historical fact placed like a lantern on the ground, watchman's calls were as much ritual as alarm. All's well wasn't always a report. It was a spell. It told thieves someone was listening. It told sleepers someone was alive. It told the night itself that humans had a script even when they barely owned shoes. Towns fined households who skipped their turn. In villages, the role rotated. Tonight's voice might be a farmer, tomorrow's the miller, next week the Reeves' surly cousin. Quirky tidbit slips in like a shadow. In some regions, the watchman carried a horn and blew it. Not just to mark hours, but to chase spirits. Belief clung to the idea that demons and witches hated noise bells, horns, staff on stone. Some places even instructed watchmen to sing psalms, turning lanes into long musical prayers. Imagine lying in your bed, straw under you, blanket over you, and hearing your baker slightly flat chanting the miserere between yawns. That was both lullaby and law, but tonight your dog doesn't buy it. His hackles rise against the grain of the blanket. He stares at the door, his entire body an arrow pointing. You hold your breath with him, lungs trying not to interfere. Somewhere in the hedge a twig breaks. Could be deer, could be fox, could be two boys daring each other to creep about, could be something smaller with a talent for drama. Or could be a thief waiting for the watchman's call to move after he's passed. Historians still argue about how effective those watches were. Did the calls deter or advertise? Some argue that announcing all's well gave thieves a schedule. The watchman just passed, we have an hour. Others point to court records showing villagers catching prowlers thanks to quick alarm. Did people truly feel safer? Chronicles sometimes note that fires still gutted towns, theft still emptied barns. Yet letters and sermons also reveal affection, the comfort of a human voice slicing night into measured slices. You press your hand to the dog's side, steadying both of you. His growl subsides into a rumble, still there but folded. The cat, insulted by drama, leaps from bed to settle on the hearth, as if to say, "Wake me when it's real." Children settle again, small fingers curling into blanket corners like anchors. Like joke number 1, if the dog could talk, he'd say, "Look, if it's a ghost, I'll bark. If it's a thief, I'll bite. If it's the neighbour's cow again, I'm resigning." The ember in the hearth cracks softly, reminding you fire is still your true night lantern. Its glow paints the shutters a dull red, as though dawn is faking an audition. The watchman's voice drifts fainter. He's taking his circuit past the mill now. The staff tap disappears into the slop of mud and silence. The lane belongs again to whatever else moves in it. Quirky fragment in some villages, watchmen also called out weather. 3 o'clock and fair, 4 o'clock and rain. A meteorological service with no barometers but a good nose and damp cloak. It mattered, farmers heard it. Bakers planned fires, insomniacs cursed or blessed their sheets. The night wasn't only policed, it was narrated. Tonight your unseen watchman could have said 3 o'clock, and the dog is suspicious, but tradition demanded optimism. Like joke number 2, if you paid him extra, maybe he would announce suspicious dogs. But then again, every dog thinks the night is up to something. The silence thickens. Your ears strain until they invent noises. You swear you hear cloth shift outside a heel test gravel, but it could be dream. The dog sighs heavily, a verdict of not worth losing the bed for. He collapses, chin back on paws, and the house breathes in sync with him. You, though, keep listening. And in listening you notice what you didn't before the faint, slow toll of another bell. Not the parish, not the watch, but a little handbell rung somewhere beyond the hedge. 1, 2, 3, deliberate private, not for the whole village. A bell without sermon, without curfew, without schedule. It's not danger, it's stranger. Like joke number 3, tucked under your yawn, you think if this turns out to be the neighbour's goat wearing someone's bell, I'm changing villages. But even as your eyelids sag, the sound repeats steady and unnervingly calm. Someone or something out there is counting hours too, and you realise as you drift between straw and thought that not all bells are meant for everyone's ears. Some are rung only for those already awake. But the next duty was even stranger. The handbell toll lingers in your head, smaller than the parish, softer than the watch, but sharper somehow, like a pin that knows where skin is thin. 1, 2, 3. Each stroke with too much pause between the kind of rhythm that feels chosen. Tonight's sensory anchor is dream sound, a noise that arrives from outside but builds a house inside you, the way waves wash into dreams until you're sure you've slept on a ship. The bell is in the lane maybe, or it is in your ear maybe, or it is in your chest, which is worse. You glance at the rafters. The dog has decided the bell isn't worth extra barking, but his ear twitches with every strike. The cat, still offended by drama, kneads the hearth rug like it's dough that insulted her. The sibling pressed against you mutters, "What's that half asleep, half wishing you'd say wind?" You whisper only a bell. The words feel lighter than truth. Mainstream historical fact tucked into the crook of the blanket bells weren't only parish tools. Households kept handbells used to call labourers in to scare birds from crops to mark death. Parish priests carried them to sick beds, ringing before the sacrament of the dying, letting neighbours know prayers were needed. A midnight bell could mean a soul slipping, or it could mean a shepherd frightening wolves. It could even be a prank, though prank seems too modern a word for nights like this. Quirky tidbit, there are records of passing bells tolled when someone was believed to be dying, sometimes rung not at church, but at the threshold of the dying person's cottage, a summons to pray. In some regions, bells were carried into fields rung at sowing and harvest to beg weather's mercy. In alpine valleys, handbells strapped to cows doubled as village timepieces. If the herd shifted at midnight, the whole valley knew it. You imagine some poor beast rattling its bell right now in your lane and wonder if that's the simplest answer. But the rhythm is too measured. Ding. Pause. Ding. Not cow shuffle, not wolf panic. Deliberate. Someone carrying it in hand. The ember in the hearth glows as though leaning closer, interested. Like joke number 1, you think if this is a ghost trying to be polite, it should knock instead of tolling like it runs a night school. The scholars arrive, rubbing their eyes, but alert as ever. Historians still argue about how bells migrated between sacred and everyday space. Some insist that once blessed bells remained strictly church property weapons of warding against storms and demons. Others argue that in practice, smaller bells slipped easily into homes, barns, even market stalls where their authority was more about habit than canon law. Did a midnight handbell always mean death, or did it sometimes mean mischief, neighbourly signal, or just a shepherd with too much imagination? The documents are uneven. The parish finds contradictory, the truth layered like straw. You close your eyes, but the bell sneaks inside anyway. Ding. Pause. Ding. With each strike your breath catches as if your ribs want a ring too. You remember old stories told at combing time, the soul bell that could be heard only by those close to death themselves. Children argued about it. Adults smiled thinly and said nothing. Was it real? Tonight the straw has no opinion, but your pulse insists on answering every toll. Quirky superstitions, some believed if you counted the strokes of a midnight bell you could learn how many years you had left. Others warned never to count lest you spend the years faster. You refused to count, but of course you already did 3. And now the number hangs in the rafters like a spider waiting. The dog huffs through his nose as if reminding you that numbers are for humans. Smells are what matter. He relaxes, but not entirely. His eyes remain half-moons in the dark, tracking the door. The cat yawns with malice and presents her back to the world. Children's breaths regain their slow wave. You lie awake longer, tuned to that small sound like a harp string plucked in a house too humble for harps. Like joke number 2, you decide that if you survive this bell, you'll invent earplugs, wax and wool rolled into genius and retire rich. The ember ticks, straw sighs, roof mutters, all normal again. But you know the night has shifted. Shared beds are one kind of closeness. Shared bells are another. Someone out there, neighbour, priest, wanderer, carried sound into your sleep and left it behind like a coin. What it buys, you'll learn later. Sleep takes you eventually stubborn as snowmelt. But your last sense before drifting is not straw, not blanket, not sibling elbow. It's the bell's small iron voice echoing in your pulse, tolling for something you haven't yet been told. Like joke number 3, you murmur into your blanket, if it's my turn to keep watch, I'm charging extra. Then you let go. And in the exact moment your eyes close fully, the bell stops, not fades, stops. But the next duty was even stranger. When the bell stops, silence does not rush in. It creeps testing corners, finding your ribs first. The lane outside has no voice now, no staff tap, no hoof, no thief making bold. The dog lifts his head again, ears spread like sails, and this time there is no growl, only suspicion, which is worse. Your breath slows until it matches his shallow deliberate. Tonight's sensory anchor is pause, the suspended hush, after sound, the way air itself feels heavier for missing what it expected, the way silence can become louder than bells. Sleep in a crowded bed does strange things. Bodies are tuned to each other like lutes sharing a peg. One sibling turns, the whole straw choir adjusts. A parent sighs and dreams realign. You hear the shift, now subtle, everyone's still asleep, but breaths have thinned like ears trying without permission. A child's hand finds yours in the dark, clutching as though you're the lock and they're the door. Mainstream historical fact, death and sleep were cousins in the medieval imagination. To sleep the sleep was a common phrase for passing. Soul sleep lingered in sermons and folk speech. Bells marked that cousinhood, the passing bell rung at the edge of life, the soul bell or lich bell carried before funerals. Communities used sound as escort. Silence was more ominous than any bell because silence could mean the bell ringer had nothing left to ring. Quirky tidbit from folklore, some swore a bell could be heard only by those marked those who would soon join the one it tolled for. Others joked about corpse candles and death lights wandering lanes with bells invisible in their flames. In Yorkshire tales, the dead coach carried a spectral driver who rang no bell but cracked a whip that only sleepers heard. In Brittany they called it Anku, a shadow, with cart and bell collecting one more passenger. These weren't just stories, they were bedtime politics. Children listened, adults half believed, and dogs like yours took no chances. The ember shifts, making a tiny cough of sparks, and you nearly jump. The dog lies back down but keeps his chin on paws like a guard refusing dismissal. You tell yourself it was a neighbour's prank, a shepherd with bad timing, a priest rehearsing for some vigil. Your voice inside doesn't sound convinced. Light joke number 1, you mutter. If it's death at the door, he should at least wipe his feet. The scholars weigh in from their high desks. Historians still argue whether the passing bell at midnight was widespread custom or patchy folklore. Ecclesiastical manuals prescribed it ring the bell when someone is dying, so prayers rise in real time. Parish records show bells rung for plague victims at odd hours. But the ghost stories, the private tolls, the bells heard by only one ear, that's where evidence thins. Was it imagination, hallucination from hunger, sleep paralysis, like the mayor in another disguise? Or was it ritual gone, feral neighbours shaping sacred tools into private warnings? The line between record and rumour, as always, is blurrier than the edge of straw against skin. You squeeze the child's hand until it relaxes. The elbowed sibling beside you mumbles again, this time with the tone of a dream. Something about geese, about stolen bread, about running. You envy them. Your eyes fix on the shutter's crack where moonlight should have been but isn't thanks to cloud. You think about bells, the ones that summoned saints, the ones that kept watch, the one that just rang for no one and everyone. Quirky notes some regions baptized bells, naming them like children Maria, Gabriel, Agnes. They were anointed with oil, dressed in robes, sprinkled with salt. Their voices were holy citizens. To hear one outside the parish at night, unbaptized, hand-sized, unclaimed, was unsettling, like meeting a stray relative no one introduced. The ember finally sighs, itself low shadows creep across the floor, and your own eyes sag, dragged by exhaustion that even fear must bow to. As you drift, the silence folds around you again, softer this time, like straw, agreeing to cradle without comment. The last thing you hear is not the bell, but the faint scuttle of a mouse rehearsing courage by the bread cupboard, a normal sound, so blessedly normal it might as well be an angel. Light joke number 2. You decide if you survive till morning, you'll petition the parish to install a no mysterious tolling between matins and Lord's ordinance. Breath deepens around you, bodies finally trusting the dark again. You fall into dream without ceremony, straw carrying you like a raft down a quiet river. And then, dream or not, you see it, a procession. Not in your lane, not in your cottage, but in your mind's eye. Figures in hoods, small bells in their hands, moving slowly, their faces unreadable. They walk past your bed as though it were part of the road. The dog whimpers in his sleep. You stir half awake and the vision dissolves into rafters and snores. Yet the impression stays, the bell may have stopped, but the company it called is still walking. Like joke number 3, you tell yourself even Death's Guild has union rules, and midnight must be their tea break. The bed takes you back gently this time, and the hush becomes sleep again. But deep in the marrow of straw, a new duty is waiting, one the bell didn't announce. You'll meet it when the cock crows, or perhaps sooner. But the next duty was even stranger. Dawn doesn't arrive like a drum roll. It sneaks softly as a thief who forgot why he came. The first light doesn't blaze through shutters. It leaks hesitant, as though unsure the village deserves it. You open your eyes to a grey wash that makes rafters look like ship's ribs and siblings' hair like nests. Tonight's sensory anchor, though it is nearly morning, is smell straw heated by bodies wool damp with dreams, ash turned cold at the hearth. The air carries a sour note too, sweat smoke, maybe the faint vinegar of last night's sachet all braided together into the fragrance of survival. The children stir first, not with words, but with the universal morning chorus. Yawns like squeaky hinges, mutters about cold toes, one complaint about elbows lodged overnight. The dog stretches back, legs quivering tongue, lolling in theatrical exhaustion, then thumps the floor with his tail as if to signal end of night shift. The cat has already begun her own version of morning washing paws with smug precision, as though nothing uncanny ever stalked the hours. Now comes the duty everyone dreads, but no one avoids. The straw must be shaken, beaten, or replaced. Mainstream historical fact scattered like husks, bedding wasn't washed the way linen was. Straw ticks and pallets were emptied and refilled when foul, sometimes seasonally, sometimes less often. Manuals and sermons scolded households for sloth, when straw rotted or crawled. Rushes, sedges, bracken, all substitutes at times gave variety, but not freedom from pests. Inventories list bed straw as a regular expense proof that beds were fed like animals. Quirky tidbit brought in with broom bristles. In some regions, bedding straw was called thresh, and when replaced, the old stuff wasn't wasted. It lined pigsties, mulched fields, or served as fuel when dry. Children sometimes wove dolls from it before it was tossed, or set handfuls ablaze in games that earned them smacks. In folklore, tossing out old straw on New Year's Eve carried bad luck away with it. Even in the humblest bed ritual clung like dust. You watch the parents begin. A tick is dragged toward the door, its seam loosened, its contents dumped. The smell rises a barn floor, a compost heap, a meadow long forgotten. The youngest wrinkle noses, the oldest shrug used to it. Straw that held warmth all winter now exhales its ghosts' mice, who visited fleas, who campaigned 1,000 breaths turned into dust. Outside, the pale sky seems to wince at the sight of it, then accept it into the yard where hens will scratch and pigs will repurpose. Like joke number 1, medieval recycling programs were ruthless, your bed today, your turnip patch tomorrow. The tick itself, once emptied, is beaten with sticks to raise its loft and shame its laziness. Children join in gleeful with authority until the cloth blooms dust that makes everyone sneeze. Fresh straw waits in a pile brought in last harvest and saved for this. Its smell is brighter greenish still, as if summer left a memory tucked in each stalk. You help stuff it, handfuls pushed into corners, smoothed flat, tamped down with the same seriousness priests use to pat holy water onto brows. Scholarly not to pick historians still argue whether straw was replaced regularly or only at extremes. Some evidence suggests many households change bedding at least twice a year, harvest and spring, while others let years stretch. Archaeological finds of medieval floors show thick matting layers not just for beds, but rushes underfoot replaced sporadically despite sermons demanding cleanliness. The truth as always splits down class lines. Wealthier homes could afford more frequent refills. Poorer ones made do shaking out ticks and hoping vinegar sachets earned their keep. As you stuff the dog nosedives into the pile, sneezing with joy, convinced you've created the world's largest toy. The children laugh, straw catching in their hair, until they look like small scarecrows. The mother clucks but smiles, knowing laughter is part of work. You breathe deeper too. The clean hay scent reminds you of a late summer fields of cicadas of sky, so heavy with blue it pressed shoulders flat. Like joke number 2, who knew that the quickest way to time travel is to bury your nose in a fresh armful of straw? The bed reassembled, you spread linen back across it, patched but dignified. Linen is the true hygiene here, washed beaten on stones, bleached in sun, frozen in frost. Its touch is smoother than straw's bristle, its smell less earthy, more like sky and water. When the children crawl back onto the renewed tick, their sighs sound like pilgrims entering a shrine, grateful, half-reverent, already ready to forget yesterday's discomforts. Quirky aside, some households kept herb bundles under the tick sprigs of lavender meadow sweet wormwood. Not every family could spare herbs for sleeping, but when they did, the fragrance turned beds into medicine. Wormwood especially was praised for chasing fleas, meadowsweet for sweetening dreams. Imagine lying down in straw scented faintly of bitter green and honeyed blossom, an olfactory lullaby. The parents tie off the tick's seam with practiced knots. The bed is reborn, creaking in approval. The fire is coaxed back with last night's embers and today's kindling. Smoke threads the rafters, not unpleasant after the fresh straw's sweetness. A rooster outside decides his throat is the proper herald of dawn. You think in spite of everything, the cottage feels cleaner, lighter, even proud. Historians still argue last debate for this section, whether medieval beds truly stank as badly as satire suggests. Satirical poems love to mock peasants for lice and stink. Moralists exaggerated filth as evidence of sin. But practical evidence accounts of laundering fines for dirty rushes, references to sun-bleaching herb use points to a spectrum. Were beds always itchy, sometimes, always filthy? Not necessarily. And the joy of fresh straw is proof that people knew the difference and sought it. Like joke number 3, you consider writing a medieval Yelp review. Great smell, nice crunch, -1 star for surprise mouse. The children flop back testing the bounce. The dog claims a corner before anyone can stop him. The cat sneaks onto the linen pretending she owns it. The parents shake their heads, but laughter lingers. Morning is fully here now. Grey fading to gold frost, dissolving on the shutters, chores waiting. But for a moment the cottage is simply proud of its new bed, smelling like meadow, and carrying the promise that tonight's sleep will be easier. You stretch straw still clinging to your hair and feel a rare calm. You think maybe the bell of last night has left no trace. But then as you smooth one last wrinkle in the linen, You notice it pressed faintly into the fabric a damp ring round as coin where no water spilled. A ring the size of a handbell's lip, but the next duty was even stranger. The ring on the linen is faint but stubborn like a watermark from a book you never meant to spill tea on. You touch it with your fingertip, it's not wet now, but it carries a chill, a coolness that doesn't belong in morning's new-made bed. The straw beneath feels ordinary, bright and crackly from its fresh stuffing, but the linen bears a ghost of something pressed there. Tonight's sensory anchor, though it is full morning, is trace the way marks linger. After hands leave the way, a bed remembers not just bodies but events, the way absence can press deeper than presence. You rub the circle, hoping it will smudge into nonsense. It doesn't. The fabric's weave seems tighter around the edge as if it flinched when touched. No one else notices. The mother is outside, scattering grain, the father stoking the rekindled fire, children tumbling into chores like sparrows. Only you and the dog stare at the ring. The dog sniffs, sneezes, and gives you a look that plainly says that was not left by bread. Mainstream historical fact folded into the wrinkle bedding was one of the most intimate records of medieval life. Inventories after deaths carefully listed one feather bed with bolster, one canvas tick, filled with straw coverlets of wool. These were valuable objects passed to heirs pledged for debt. They also held memory marriages, begun births, received deaths, awaited. A bed was both furniture and archive, which is why wills singled them out. If your linen shows a ring this morning, history would count it among strange accidents recorded in chronicles, where signs and omens often took domestic forms, blood that would not wash from sheets, shapes pressed into pillows, candles guttering in patterns. Quirky tidbit. Some households believed angels left marks on pillows where they bent close. Others said demons pressed rings into linen when they hovered too long. Witch rings appear in late folklore circles on beds, tables, even milk pails, unexplained stains that elders muttered over. One Yorkshire story tells of a farmer's bed that woke each morning with damp rings, until a passing friar sprinkled salt on the mattress and declared the devil had been pacing. Salt fixed it. So did turning the tick upside down. You consider flipping yours, though fresh straw seems too proud to ruin. The scholars, ever cautious intervene historians, still argue how seriously to take such domestic miracles. Were they simply mildew stains, irons seeping from damp straw, or tricks of candlelight, or were they recorded and retold because they gave people language for unease? The line between accident and omen was thin, and medieval chroniclers didn't mind walking it. What matters isn't which explanation is true, but that beds were considered porous to the invisible. Sleep itself was half a theology. You call a sibling overpoint to the mark. They shrug, say it looks like where someone set a bowl. But no bowl was near. Another sibling presses their palm into it, giggles when nothing happens and runs off. You're left with the quiet conviction that the ring is not for them, it is for you. Light joke number 1, you think at least the bell knows how to leave a calling card. Couldn't it have just knocked like everyone else? The dog, unsatisfied with shrugs, paws at the tick as if to bury the ring. Straw crackles, dust floats. The mark remains. The mother returns, wiping hands on apron, sees the fuss and shakes her head. Straw sweats, she says, meaning damp can leave marks. She tosses a pinch of salt on the spot without ceremony, the same way she'd scatter it on spilled ale. Then she waves everyone back to chores. But her eyes linger a heartbeat too long. Quirky aside, salt was the universal purifier sprinkled on thresholds, cradles, churns and beds. It marked bargains, chased spirits and flavoured stories as much as broth. In some regions, new straw was salted as it was stuffed into ticks, both for pests and for luck. That habit turns your mother's gesture into something older than she admits. The chores claim the room. The bed is remade, the mark salted, the children sent to fetch water. The day grows louder with crows and carts making the night's bell seem laughable. Yet when you sit back down, smoothing the linen once more, the faint ring still greets your palm. Smaller now, but no less deliberate. Light joke number 2, you imagine explaining to a priest, "Forgive me, Father, the bell is taken to autographing my sheets." The ember fire grows into flame, the pot hangs again, and smoke laces upward like nothing odd has ever happened. But you know the bed has kept something, and that knowledge hums under chores like a string plucked too soft for others to hear. The scholars would say you've reached the soft edge where folklore, faith and furniture overlap. They'd write an article about material culture and spectral memory citing wills and herb sachets. But you press to the straw, know only this, the bed has begun to answer back. Like joke number 3, you mutter. If the bell wanted to be part of the family, it could at least help beat the straw. The house fills with noise again, parents talking, children laughing, rooster crowing twice to emphasize himself. The mark seems smaller in daylight, as if morning is its enemy. Still, when you turn away, you feel it like an eye in your back. And then just as you leave the bed to fetch water, the dog barks at nothing once sharp, and you hear it again, the faint ring of a handbell, not outside now, but in your memory, or your ear, or the rafters. One toll, then silence. But the next duty was even stranger. Morning insists itself, though your eyes would prefer negotiation. The faint ring mark is gone now, salt and chores having bullied it into silence, but you know where it was, and the memory lies under the linen like a wrinkle nobody else can see. The cock crows, hens, scatterbuckets clatter. The house begins its long daily exhale. Tonight's sensory anchor, though it is fully day, is return the way the world comes back after night's tricks, the way familiar noises sow your body into daylight, the way sleep's strangeness gets folded into chores. You rise, or rather the bed releases you reluctantly. Straw sticks to your shift a final affectionate bristle. The dog shakes himself, bells his ears, and stretches like a bow drawn. The cat leaps onto the new tick as if to claim she made it. Siblings tumble half proud of their shared warmth, half grouchy at remembered elbows. Parents already debate bread versus porridge, which is medieval for civilization resumes. Mainstream historical fact mornings were labour not leisure. Children fetched water-fed animals, swept hearths. Straw beds were beaten, blankets folded. Chamber pots emptied discreetly into yards or middens. No long yawning luxury, just immediate work because dawn was clock and whip. The bell of the church might toll prime the first office, and households matched their rhythms to its call. Quirky tidbit tucked in with bread crusts, some regions had the custom of sprinkling holy water on beds in the morning, a kind of spiritual housekeeping. Others knocked the bed frame thrice to scare off lingering spirits of the night. In certain Alpine valleys, people whispered a charm while folding blankets. Stay warmth till night returns. These little rituals are nowhere in great chronicles, but they live in margins, in notes, in the smell of beds freshly made. The scholars shuffle in to remind you historians still argue whether medieval mornings were always so rigid. Did families truly leap at first light, or did they sometimes laze if fields didn't beckon? Court rolls scolded idlers, which means there must have been idlers. Records of festivals and saints' days show later risings after late vigils. The truth as ever is variety. Sometimes dawn was a whip, sometimes a pillow, but this dawn is ordinary. You help beat straw, you shake a blanket, you mutter about lost sleep. The bell of last night is a memory you don't share, not yet. Work has its own bell now, ladles clanging, hens squabbling the scrape of pails. The night's uncanny edges soften under chores until they sound almost foolish. And yet when you brush your fingers once more across the linen, you still feel the ghost of that ring. Like joke number 1, you think if sleep was supposed to be boring history, why does my bed keep writing sequels? The morning grows. Smoke rises from cottages up the lane, making a small parliament of chimneys. Fields wait, cows complain, the river mutters. You slip outside straw, still clinging, and look at the sky, pale, washed, nothing unusual. But in the stillness before true bustle begins, you wonder whether the handbell was a warning, a trick, or just another part of medieval life, half fact, half omen, half shared warmth. Quirky final note beds were not just straw and linen, they were memory itself. Every family carried bed stories, who cried, who coughed, who dreamed, who saw bells in the dark. Those stories lingered longer than straw retold until they became part of the bed's frame, invisible but unshakable. Like joke number 2, you decide you'll tell your children someday that you once slept through a bell's visit and survived, and they'll laugh, then check their own sheets nervously. The chores take over and the day asserts itself. Sun breaks, carts roll, work begins. Sleep dissolves into duty and duty dissolves into years. And yet the bed waits for tonight, when bodies will pile back onto straw, when warmth and elbows will reassert themselves, when dreams may or may not bring bells. Like joke number 3, you realise medieval childhood meant never owning a bed to yourself and never running out of stories to tell from the one you shared. You leave the cottage, shoulders braced for chores, but ears still straining just in case. And though no bell rings, you know you will always hear it 1, 2, 3 when the night goes quiet enough. The story slows here, softer than footsteps on moss, because the night has already walked you through straw and bells, through elbows and watchmen, through omens that flickered and passed like candlelight on rafters. Now there's nothing left to prove, only the slow unwinding of thread. Imagine the cottage again, not as it was in commotion with straw, fluffed and chores in arms, but as it is when all is still. The fire has banked itself to a single breath of red, the children's snores have softened into one woven cloth of sound, the dog has claimed his corner without apology, and the cat, well, she has taken the warmest place as cats always do. Outside dawn has begun its cautious work, laying pale colour along the hedges, brushing frost from the lane, and lifting the world by degrees. But in here time is stretched. Your breath has become slower, longer rounder. Each inhale carries the faint smell of straw and wool, each exhale leaves behind the weight of elbows, chores, even bells. The blanket no longer holds quarrels, it holds only warmth. The rafters which once listened for watchmen's calls now hum softly like timbers on a quiet ship. You can let go of details now. No more watch bells, no more arguments about fleas or scholars at their desks. The bed has no more duties to remind you of. You can picture the straw spreading wider until it becomes a whole meadow, a plain of soft gold that carries you gently endlessly without asking where. The air is warmer here, the sounds are muffled, and you have nothing left to do but lie still. So breathe, let your shoulders sink, and let the night finish its work for you.